Hey guys. This is part 7 of What If Naruto Was Obsessed with Getting Stronger. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 18. Outside these walls. He had never been one for funerals. He hadn't been to one in decades. Somewhere along the way in his life he had gone to one too many, buried one friend more than he could stand, and avoided every other he was supposed to be at like the plague ever since. It wasn't about respect. Everyone he had ever fought beside knew just how much he cared for his comrades. It was about his own happiness. No shinobi he had ever fought beside would care if he showed up at their funeral, so he didn't. Life was too short to be spent mourning those who had lost theirs. He had had that figured out by the start of the Third War. Was it selfish? Probably. Did he care? Not a chance. He hadn't attended the service for his most prized student years ago, though he had considered it, so it would come as no surprise that he didn't show up at his sensei's either. Instead, he gathered up his newest student and whisked him away to find the old man's replacement. It was a journey filled with adventure, intrigue, and most importantly, debauchery, or at least that's what he told Naruto when he'd kicked his door in that morning. "Sensei. You still haven't told me who we're looking for," Naruto whined from just behind him as they powered through the treetops. "Or, where we're going." He had been known to leave out potentially key details on more than one occasion, but in his defense Naruto hadn't put up much of a fight when told they were leaving this morning. The boy was as big a fan of funerals as he was, it seemed. "We're going to find a princess," Jiraiya exclaimed, a shit-eating grin on his face as he turned to behold his student's stupefied expression. You weren't expecting that one, were ya, kid? If you didn't want to tell me you could've just said, geez," the blonde mumbled. Jiraiya laughed outright at the irritated expression on the boy's face. He was too easy to tease. The Sanin turned himself fully to face his student, now skipping backwards through the trees at pace. "Who says I'm fucking with you, kid?" he returned easily, expertly hiding the smallest of hitches in his voice as his newest student morphed into a ghost. Close-cropped blonde hair lengthened, forming bangs that framed a sharpened jawline. Narrower blue eyes glimmered in annoyance as whisker marks faded to nothingness, replaced with unblemished tan skin. Namake's Minato stared back at him for a lost moment in time before Jiraiya blinked and the ghost of his past faded back into the ether. Despite having his mother's face, Naruto was damn near the spitting image of his father with his new green flak vest. The Sanin quickly turned back around to face forward. "Oh, I dunno, sensei, common sense?" the blonde piped sarcastically. "Fair point," Jiraiya conceded, still shaken. "Bah! You shouldn't doubt me, my very young apprentice. I have wisdom far beyond your meager comprehension, for I am Jiraiya, the one true sage of Mount Myaboku. A man so gallant that no woman has ever refused him. A man so powerful that his enemies quake in fear at the mere mention of his name," Naruto recited, voice flat. His eyes held a glimmer of amusement, however, and Jiraiya felt himself grin. "Am I on track here, sensei?" So he does listen." Ever since their first impromptu lesson in the hot springs, the blonde's awareness of the world around him had slowly but surely become something resembling acceptable. He was far from proficient, but he wasn't quite as liable to be killed because of lack of attention to detail, which meant that Jiraiya could actually focus on developing the boy as a shinobi. He hadn't been this excited in years, damn near 13 years in fact. 13 years of traveling the world over, searching for whispers of his traitorous teammate. 13 years of poor leads and dead ends. 13 years of dedicated service to his village, looking for threats and neutralizing them before they truly materialized. 13 years of trying to forget about the loss of a man who was supposed to change the world, and 13 years of wondering how he was ever going to explain everything to his godson. 13 years of trying to put into words how Sarutobi's request, not order, to stay out of Naruto's early life, in the wake of Minato's death, had been a good enough reason to stay away. He had no explanation. None that he had dreamed up had ever satisfied his conscience, and he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that they would satisfy Naruto. So he leapt when Sarutobi had finally put him in charge of the boy's development. Over a decade of traipsing about every corner of the continent suddenly became worth it. He had uncovered information about an organization that was hellbent on capturing the Biju, their hosts be damned, and knew that Naruto would soon be hunted, and not just by the Akatsuki. Not even he had predicted that Naruto would ever get caught up in Orochimaru's twisted machinations, which only heightened the pressure he was under. Naruto needed to be well prepared to fight the coming darkness, and the task had fallen to Jiraiya. Perhaps 13 years was too conservative of an estimate. He hadn't been this excited since the end of the Second Great War. He had had 2 students prodigiously talented in the shinobi arts, either of whom he had been certain would change the world as the child of prophecy. Minato and Nagato, 2 boys from different nations that he had been blessed to bestow even a fraction of his knowledge upon. Legends in the making who had the potential to shape the world into a place worth living in, and then they were dead. Nagato and his friends slaughtered by Hanzo sometime near the end of the Third War. Minato cursed to an eternity in the Shinigami's stomach, stopping the Kyuubi's rampage. Naruto was the only one left, and where before Jiraiya had felt all hope for the prophecy lost, he now saw a glimmer of possibility. At 13, the boy was blessed with his mother's vitality and strength of chakra. As an Uzumaki, he would have had large reserves even without the Kyuubi being sealed into him at birth. But with it, Jiraiya had sensed, truly felt, Naruto's chakra 3 times since he had known the boy. Once in the Forest of Death when he had unleashed his rage upon the outmatched Oto Genin. Once when he had completed the second stage of training to master the Rasengan. Once when he had let loose a fraction of the Kyuubi's power in his fight against Gaara. Massive didn't truly begin to describe what Jiraiya had felt. Oceans of chakra had greeted his senses. The Kyuubi's otherworldly reserves had bled through the seal for over a decade, leaving the blonde teenager with so much that Jiraiya doubted that he'd ever in his life experience true exhaustion. Minato had been a genius among geniuses. Orochimaru had been the same. Nagato's legendary eyes had given him an insight to the workings of chakra that Jiraiya had never dreamed of. At 13, all had been better shinobi than Naruto was currently. Jiraiya himself had been as well. Naruto's skill set wasn't developed. He wasn't unbelievably fast. He had no naturally inherent grasp of ninjutsu. He was unrefined, his potential untapped, and yet had still tackled a fully manifested Biju, for the most part, on his own. The Sanin contained a shudder as he glanced once more at the blonde keeping pace with him. No, excited didn't really begin to cover what Jiraiya felt about being able to teach Naruto. People looked at him differently now. They had always looked at him, whether they wanted to or not. At first with disdain and thinly veiled rage. Then with wariness. And finally with disdain once more. He wasn't used to all. What were you expecting, idiot? His traitorous mind supplied. He had, after all, damn near fought a Biju on his own. It wasn't unreasonable that the general populace started seeing him in a different light, considering he played an integral part in defeating the greatest threat to Konoha proper since the first Great Shinobi War. With a little help from a friendly neighborhood ANBU squad, of course. The general populace didn't care about that part of the story. Hell, few enough shinobi cared that he had had help. He had beaten back the threat, scattering the Biju's chakra to the 4 corners of the continent when he obliterated Gaara. They didn't see the exhaustion that had kept him unconscious for over a day. They didn't see the tears that fell when he was told that the Sandaime had died in a last-ditch, failed effort to destroy Orochimaru. They lauded him as a hero where they had once scorned his very existence. Some were still wary, of course. 13 years of hatred could hardly come undone that easily. But the blonde had never been the recipient of so many well-wishes in his young life. He wasn't used to awe, and he didn't like it. The irony? He was only a few short years removed from having wanted that kind of attention more than anything else in the world. Even Ino and Kiba looked at him differently, though they hid it well. There was a wonderment in their gaze even as they made fun of the villagers who damn near tripped over themselves thanking him. A wry tint in Kiba's voice as he made a joke about still being able to take him in a fight. A glint of pride in Ino's eyes as she pulled back from giving him a goodnight kiss. They were the hero's teammates now. With the villagers it had been a surprise and an annoyance at their hypocrisy, but altogether not unexpected. Ino and Kiba were his family. They weren't supposed to treat him like anything other than their teammate and friend, and a bit more, in Ino's case. While he supposed it wasn't nearly as heavy-handed as the villagers' turnabout, it still irked him. Worst of all, he couldn't really explain it to them. How did one explain that they hated almost everything to do with the fickle population he had lived among for his entire life? That their change in behavior, however slight, reminded him of the villagers he had come to hate. They had seen his anger, even gleaned a hint of understanding upon learning about the Kyuubi. But they had never lived it. They had no idea what it felt like to be regarded as nothing more than a manifestation of the villagers' worst nightmares. He wasn't a person. He was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Nothing more, nothing less. And this latest rush of favor would evaporate just as quickly as the last when the time came. You are their pawn, a weapon forged in the heat of desperation to be used and discarded. Konohas to ignore for your service, and a scapegoat to be held up in times of strife. Perhaps the snake Sanin hadn't been entirely correct in his statement of Naruto's utility to Konoha, but he certainly appeared more right than wrong. The only two who didn't treat him differently were Sasuke and Jiraiya. The Uchiha had shown up in his hospital room sporting a new Chunin vest, apparently for outstanding service during the invasion. He had given him a quick once-over, sneered at his bedridden state, said "Tch, find me when you're out of this place." Usual spot. No holding back this time, dead last, and left him to his recovery, and he would have, if only for a glimpse of normality in his whirlwind of a life, had his new sensei not burst in on the day of his release, thrown his own Chunin vest in his face, and unilaterally decided that they were going to find the old man's replacement. "Fuck debauchery," he groused, sweat pouring down his face and chest as he used every ounce of concentration he was capable of to remain invisible. Naturally, he was in an onsen. Jiraiya, true to form, wasn't about to let finding the next Hokage interfere with his research. The Sanin was sprawled next to Naruto in the baths, in a small town called Shakuba, calmly taking notes in between the occasional giggle. Of course, the legendary Nin was using his usual cloaking method, leaving him completely invisible to the numerous women scattered around the bath. As a matter of course, Jiraiya had decided to turn the relaxing afternoon into a training exercise. The Maisegekyo no Jutsu was difficult enough to perform and maintain under normal circumstances. Using it while trying to avoid sharp bursts of Suetun Chakra Jiraiya casually sent at him every few seconds was a bit more frustrating. "I am gonna wring every ounce of knowledge out of this guy," Naruto thought, chakra control working in overdrive to maintain his cloaking as a jet of water clipped him underwater. "And then I'm gonna fucking murder him with it." Preoccupied as his thoughts were, his focus slipped. The Gamma Sanin wasted no time, and a jet of water, more powerful than the last, caught Naruto on his upper thigh. He clamped down on a squawk of pain as he felt his cloaking jutsu begin to fail. Tiger Borak's dog snake. Naruto's chakra reached out and deftly replaced himself with a log that was conveniently placed outside the back wall of the onsen where he and Jiraiya had been lounging. The blonde exhaled hard as the Maisegekyo no Jutsu faded completely, slapping the ground in frustration. "Fucking hell," he muttered, shaking his head and leaning it back against the bamboo wall of the hot springs. Maybe Yamato's insistence he work on his chakra control before the Chunin exam final, he contained a wince at the thought of his second dead sensei, had been better founded than he'd originally thought. Chakra control, fucking chakra control. It's what it all seemed to come down to these days. Too bad I've got a fucking demon in my system, Naruto thought derisively. Thanks for that one, Dad. He had raw power to throw around, and a lot of it. But raw power was useless unless he had the control to direct it. Not every enemy was as big a target as the Shikaku's head had been. Raw power had its uses. It had carried him through wave and river country, two situations where he'd likely have been killed otherwise. But it hadn't been enough to strike a killing blow against that treacherous Tsunade Jonin from the third exam, Baki, his mind supplied. It hadn't been enough to even touch the traitorous Anbu that had killed Yamato. His wind chakra, the most offensively oriented element, hadn't even touched the arrogant man. In the end, it was his deception that had caught the man off guard. His power had merely been the blow landed. He didn't bother to entertain the idea that raw power would be enough to help him survive the Akatsuki, whenever they decided to make a move on him. Shaking his head at his circular musings, he formed a tiger seal and disappeared in an explosion of smoke, and reappeared in the men's changing area, where he was immediately greeted by his new sensei. "What took you so long, brat?" the Sanin asked, already changed and flipping casually through the pages of notes he had collected in the hot springs. Naruto blinked in surprise. Jiraiya always took his time before leaving the onsen if Naruto had been cast out first, for research purposes, of course. "Thinking, sensei," the white-haired man snorted. "Didn't hurt yourself, did you?" Naruto felt one of his eyes twitch. This guy, skillfully ignoring his immature sensei, the blonde quickly changed into his standard attire, now complete with his brand spanking new Chunin vest, and led the way out of the onsen. Jiraiya swiftly overtook him, still flipping through his notes in earnest. Shakuba town wasn't quite a city, but it was unlike any other place Naruto had been in his admittedly limited travels. It was a place designed entirely for the pleasure of those who were within its walls. Inns, restaurants, bars, and most notably, brothels lined the main streets. It had a small casino that Naruto and Jiraiya had scoped out upon their arrival the day before, and the hot springs they had just left. Even though Jiraiya insisted that this was the first, entirely legitimate stop on the way to finding the Sandame's replacement, Naruto had his suspicions. Jiraiya sighed from in front of him, tucking his notes into a seemingly non-existent pocket of space. He turned to Naruto, eyes serious. Alright, kid, look, I'm no good at all this touchy-feely emotional crap you've had going on since we got here, but I'm gonna try anyway. What's eating you? The blonde started, but before he could even open his mouth and protest, Jiraiya had cut him off. And don't feed me some bullshit line about thinking. You can't bullshit a bullshitter, brat. I'm the best there is at what I do. Naruto glanced away, a frustrated sigh escaping his lips. Dunno where to start. Some say the begin. Yes, the fucking beginning, sensei, Naruto snapped, pointedly ignoring Jiraiya's self-satisfied smirk. I need to be stronger. The Sanin paused in the street, and Naruto halted just behind him. Jiraiya pondered his statement for a long moment before. That's what you're going all angsty on me for, kid? He was going to kill him. Seriously, kiddo, you're 12. 13, same shit. Jiraiya waved him off. My point stands. This isn't the type of shit you need to be worrying about right now. The older man sighed heavily. You're young. You'll get plenty strong in time. I don't have time, Naruto bit out, nearly spitting the words. The Chunin exams had shown him his limits in extensive detail. Nearly ineffective against the two treacherous shinobi in the arena, powerless at the whim of Orochimaru. Now picture yourself standing alone, against an organization of my near equals. No, raw power wasn't going to be nearly enough. Jiraiya sent him a measuring look that the blonde returned with equal measure. The Sanin huffed, closing his eyes in apparent exasperation before focusing back on his student. Look, Naruto, I get where you're coming from, he said. You've seen a lot of strong shinobi these past few weeks, never mind the Shikaku. It's intimidating, it's mind-boggling, and it's scary seeing that kind of strength thrown around, he continued. But you can't let that change you. You can't let that glimpse of power alter how you live your life. It's not worth it. Trust me on that one. The Sanin trailed off, gazing outward and upward for a moment, seemingly lost in some memory or another. Naruto was silent as he watched his teacher. I remember one day, I wasn't much younger than you are now, me and the rest of my genin team were coming home from a mission and ran into an IWA kill squad. 4 elite jonin, went by the name of the Sentenbyotai. They were pretty well known back in the day too, Jiraiya said. Wanted Sarutobi-sensei's head, of course. Well, the old man just told us students to stand back while he took care of business. He shook his head with a wry smile. Sensei made quick work of them, but 3 managed to survive the first few seconds of the fight. I just remember thinking that they were 3 tough-ass shinobi to be able to do that. Real elite jonin. Jiraiya snapped back to the present in an instant, taking Naruto off guard with the sharpness of his gaze. None of the 3 of us were the same after that. We had seen Sensei show off before, but to dispatch 3 A-rank shinobi without blinking an eye? It was unfathomable. We all wanted a slice of that cake, so we went out and got it. The Sanin sighed, rubbing his temple tiredly. I guess what I'm trying to say, Naruto, is that it's easy to fall into the trap of constantly chasing power. It's there for the taking, but it demands a sacrifice. Me and Tsunade? We sacrificed a lot, and we got a lot stronger for it. And Orochimaru? That day changed him more than any of us, and well, you know how he turned out. He pinned Naruto with a searching gaze once more. I've seen a lot of shinobi go the way he did, kid. Good shinobi. Good men and women twisted by their need to get stronger. I've had to cut a few of them down myself. Naruto's stomach dropped to his feet. I don't want to see that happen to you too, kid, Jiraiya finished quietly, turning to resume their walk back to the inn. Naruto, shell-shocked, followed in his wake. I understand, sensei, the blonde ventured after a few moments of silence. His lack of time, however, remained. But you've still got my crazy ex-teammate interested in you, Jiraiya cut in. Never mind, others. The hairs on Naruto's arms stood up as a swooping sensation passed through his stomach. Could he mean others, sensei? He asked quietly. The large man sighed, and he had done a lot of that today, lips quirking into a mirthless smile as he looked at his student. It's all about power in the end. Ever since the time of the Rikudo, Sanin people have been obsessed with the Biju. That hasn't changed in centuries. There are always gonna be people trying to claim the power of the tailed beasts, and the Kyuubi especially. My old teammate is one of them, and he's far from the only one, Jiraiya said. He sighed once more. I'll get into them with you soon enough, Naruto. For now, just trust me, okay? He offered the silent Naruto a reassuring smile. I'm not about to let guys like that get their hands on you, and I'm a pretty good guy to have watching your back. It was Naruto's turn to sigh. I just want to be able to take care of myself. I don't want you to have to watch my back, sensei. He nearly started as Jiraiya clapped a hand to his right shoulder and squeezed. Course you don't, kiddo. Gotta give it time, though. I'll have you whipped into something resembling a decent shinobi soon enough. Hell, you already don't suck nearly as much as you did a month ago. Naruto swatted at the hand on his shoulder good-naturedly, managing not to bristle at the casual insult to his skills. Sensei, with all due respect, please go fuck yourself. Ha! You should know by now, brat, there's always a willing woman waiting for me just around the corner. The blonde rolled his eyes, smiling in spite of himself. Sure there is, you perv. Super pervert to you. I told you not to sell me short, Jiraiya chastised seriously. And would you look at that? He whispered fiercely. Naruto followed his gaze and immediately felt his eyebrows shoot toward his hairline. A buxom brunette sashayed toward them from the front of one of the many pleasure houses they were passing. She wore a tight, strapless blue dress that left little to the imagination. 2 gold bands that gleamed in the midday sun encircled her slim waist, accentuating soft curves. Black heels placed her a couple inches taller than Naruto, and the blonde felt his pulse begin to race. Deawamam, he thought, uncaring that he was staring at the stunning woman. The smallest upturn of full lips belied her awareness of the attention she was being paid. She surveyed the two of them for a moment before her eyes, as dark as her inky hair, settled on Jiraiya. A wink so quick Naruto wondered if he imagined it was tossed the Sanin's way. The blonde ruthlessly quashed a flare of envy for his teacher, and she turned slowly to walk toward the storefront she had come from. Ah, Naruto heard Jiraiya breathe at the invitation. Every woman has their own beauty, my very young apprentice. Some, of course, are easier to observe than others. Naruto sighed. Lucky bastard, he thought uncharitably, still staring at the retreating form of the woman. The room key, sensei? Hey, you catch on quick, kiddo. Jiraiya tossed him the key and spared him a glance far sharper than the blonde had expected. Go work on your meditation back at the room. Focus on your awareness of the here and now. His face was relaxed, as befitted a man about to greatly enjoy his afternoon, but Naruto's eyes, slowly but surely learning to truly see, noticed a slight tension in his teacher's bearing. He exhaled, immediately on his guard. Yes, sensei, there's a good student, Jiraiya said, swiftly ruffling Naruto's hair before the boy could react. He strode off after the woman in blue, hastening to catch up to her. I'll be back before too long, kiddo, he tossed over his shoulder. A promise. Naruto nodded silently. He didn't know what had suddenly set Jiraiya on his guard, but he knew to be wary. Anything that would set the Sanin on edge was definitely worrisome. For now, just trust me, okay? Doesn't look like I have much of a choice, Naruto thought, Jiraiya's request from just minutes ago ringing in his ears. He formed a single sign and disappeared in Shunshin. The door locked with a click of the tumbler. Naruto wasted no time creating 3 Kage Bunshin. One immediately hinged into a chair next to the door that the second sat on. The third took a seat on the bed, legs crossed under it, and began to meditate. Naruto, the original, formed a tiger seal with his hands. Taking a deep breath, he pushed his chakra to the surface of his skin on the exhale. The feeling of eggs breaking broken over every inch of his skin was familiar now as the Maisegekure took effect. Precautions taken, he plopped down against the wall facing the door of the small room, the window looking out into the street just above his head. Jiraiya had sensed something amiss back down on the street, which could mean a few different things. Someone knew about their search for the next Hokage and was looking to put a stop to it. Or someone was after Jiraiya and Naruto was to wait at the room so as to not be caught in the crossfire. Not bloody likely with my luck, the blonde thought, his heart rate elevating in nervousness. Was Akatsuki finally making a move? He had always expected to be blitzed by whatever S-ranked monster would be sent after him. He had had nightmares about the scenario for years, nightmares of dead bodies of teammates, and senseless destruction, and his own inability to prevent it. He hadn't expected to be waiting for the assault, sitting in a hotel room while the clock ticked away in the corner, possibly spending the last moments of his life wondering when the other shoe would drop. Pull yourself together. Jiraiya isn't far away. He'll be able to handle this, Naruto comforted himself, all the while nearly snarling at his own helplessness. Unbidden, the Kyuubi's chakra began to stir in his gut, and he clamped down on the impulse to let it explode outward. Whoever found him here, if they find me, would be getting a face full of Kyuubi as a welcome. And how fucking long have I been? 2 knocks at the door cut off his thought, and Naruto's heart leapt to his throat. Seriously? He thought, thrown for a moment even as the clone closest to the door slowly rose to answer, a kunai behind his back. Ignoring the absurdity of Akatsuki potentially knocking on his door politely, Naruto willfully brought the Kyuubi's chakra into his system. S-ranked or not, If the person behind that door was an enemy, he was ready to unleash hell. The clone opened the door and every ounce of fortified strength was sucked right out of him as Uchiha Itachi's Sharingan stared over the head of the clone, through his cloaking jutsu, and into his eyes. Shit, he breathed, stunned and unmoving as he beheld the man who had, with his words, shaped the past 5 years of his life. A black cloak adorned with red clouds covered the man from the bottom of his chin to his knees. Hair the color of slate framed an angular face that had haunted Naruto's dreams since the night of the massacre. "Hello, Naruto-kun," Itachi said pleasantly, his voice a smooth tenor that was somehow calming despite the perilous situation. "I must ask you to come with me, please. They will hunt you, Uzumaki Naruto." The clan killer had neglected to mention that he would be the one doing the hunting. Naruto entertained the idea that Itachi didn't mean him any harm. He had warned him of a group of powerful criminals who wanted him dead years ago, after all. But then S-ranked criminals rarely meant good news, and Itachi had slaughtered his own clan that night. His criminal status wasn't in question. His sanity, on the other hand. The blonde didn't bother mincing words as he formed a hasty Rasengan and slammed it into the wall behind him. He propelled himself backwards and out into the town with a burst of chakra as his 3 clones rapidly converged on Itachi. A crackle of lightning and the phantom smell of ozone was the only warning he got from the memories of his destroyed clones before Itachi was in his face. So fast was all his mind had time to process, as he barely got his arms raised in time to stop the Uchiha's punch from caving his chest in. The strike sent him rocketing toward the street below, and only a hasty roll prevented him from cratering. He found his feet quickly, hands forming the familiar cross-shaped seal. 3 clones burst into existence next to him with a pop, the first already speeding through hand seals. Rat Tiger Dog, a futon, Rankuden exploded out of the clone's mouth and hurtled toward the Uchiha. Itachi broke to his left, directly into the path of the second clone bearing down on him, knuckle knives roaring with wind chakra. The clones slashed out at the missing Nin's head, a 3-foot blade of pure chakra extending from the end of the knife. "You've grown, Naruto-kun," the rogue Uchiha complimented, ducking the blow with ease. Naruto winced as the memory of a straight kick to the chest greeted him upon the clone's demise. The blonde palmed 2 kunai and sheathed them in his wind chakra before hurling them at Itachi. The final clone gripped its wrist, and suddenly the sound of chakra grinding against chakra filled the town as a fully formed Rasengan sprang to life in its hand. A seal-less Kowarimi was thwarted as the missing Nin knocked both kunai off course with twin throwing knives of his own. Recovering quickly, the clone blurred faster than Naruto's eyes could track in a shunshin. The speed ninjutsu proved useless, as Itachi reacted faster than Naruto thought possible. He smoothly redirected the Rasengan with the back of his left hand before stabbing the overextended clone in the neck with a kunai hidden in his right sleeve. "I am so fucked. My best friend was a man given the moniker of Sunshin no Shusui," Itachi stated placidly, his kunai disappearing back into his sleeve. "Your shunshin, unfortunately, pales in comparison to his." The Uchiha disappeared and Naruto's eyes widened as he hopped over sliding kick, reflexes acting before his mind caught up to the speed of battle. Itachi stuck a hand to the ground with chakra, halted his momentum, and drove a kick into Naruto's exposed stomach that knocked the breath out of his lungs. "Your tactics are simplistic," Itachi critiqued, appearing above the airborne blonde. Naruto twisted in midair, snapping out a chakra-laden kick towards Itachi's torso. It crashed into the Uchiha's outstretched arm and halted. "Your attacks lack potency," the missing Nin said before slamming his fist into Naruto's face. The blonde hit the earth like a meteor, cratering in a 4-foot deep hole as cracks in the road expanded outward rapidly. Stars flashed in front of his eyes as his vision blinked in and out, the sky turning from blue, to green, to yellow, to white, and back to blue again as he lay dazed. Distantly, he recognized that he'd never been hit harder. Soft footfalls greeted his ears as Itachi came to stand at the edge of the crater he'd punched Naruto into. His cloak, unruffled from the conflict, rippled in the breeze. To Naruto's slowly readjusting eyes, the Uchiha looked almost disappointed. "Tales of your exploits have been spread far and wide, Naruto-kun. You have indeed grown strong since we last met," Itachi said. His voice was entirely calm, not a hint of strain at having so soundly beaten the blonde below him. "You are, however, underdeveloped in many ways. You cannot hope to stand against me as you are today. Your skill pales in comparison to my own when I was your age even. I fear my words from so long ago have not been enough." Naruto blinked and suddenly found himself with his back against the wall of his hotel room once more. His clones were frozen, and Itachi had stepped around the one who had answered the door to face Naruto fully. "Genjutsu," the blonde breathed. He bit down on his lower lip harshly, drawing blood in an attempt to break the secondary illusion he was undoubtedly caught in. Blue eyes widened when nothing happened. My Sharingan casts genjutsu that are not so easily broken, Itachi said. Naruto gingerly rose, unsure. Why not just kill me? He asked, his voice nearly a whisper. The Uchiha blinked. You have undoubtedly surmised that I am a member of Akatsuki. However, I have no wish to kill you, Naruto-kun. Naruto balked, incredulous. Then what the fuck was that? He jabbed his thumb over his shoulder at the street where their one-sided fight had taken place. A measure of your capacity, Itachi replied. As I said, your exploits have become rather well known to those who are interested enough to listen. I wished to see what rumors were based in fact. The rogue Uchiha sighed almost imperceptibly. I had hoped that my warning from years ago would have helped push you toward the strength you will need to fight the coming darkness. The "you're not good enough" was left implied. Naruto felt his mouth go dry and his stomach drop to his feet even as he bristled. You don't fucking know me, he bit out. You have no idea what I've done, the training I've put myself through. The words tasted like ash in his mouth even as he said them. He didn't give a flying fuck about Uchiha Itachi's disappointment. What that disappointment meant, however, was significantly more terror-inducing. I doubt neither your training nor your dedication. Merely your skill. Itachi regarded him impassively, Sharingan eyes seeing everything, perceiving everything about him. Naruto averted his gaze, clenching his fists at his side. I'm fucking nothing to this guy, he realized. You fight with precision, Itachi continued. Your chakra is both potent and expansive, but you do not know how to use it properly. Your potential is easy to see, but that is all it is. Not that I don't appreciate the lecture, but is there a point to this? Naruto asked, teeth bared in frustration. The Uchiha kept his gaze firmly rooted on the blonde. He paused for a moment, seemingly weighing his options before. I did not warn you of Madara and Akatsuki simply for your own benefit. Your survival, however, is integral. Madara recruited me to help him achieve his goal of world peace. Naruto felt his eyebrows shoot up of their own accord. Unfortunately, his idea of peace would benefit few other than himself. He must be stopped at all costs. He intends to collect the 9 Biju in order to resurrect the Jubi, the legendary Biju defeated by the Rikudo Sanin. With its power at his disposal, he will cast a massive genjutsu on the world in order to end all conflicts. Naruto blinked, opening and closing his mouth ineffectually as Itachi watched patiently from the center of the room. You're serious? The blonde finally managed to ask. At the Uchiha's raised eyebrow he shook himself. You do realize how ridiculous that sounds, right? Itachi's lips twitched, but he recovered from his bout of hilarity quickly. Regardless of how bizarre his plan might be, Naruto-kun, he is a powerful man with powerful forces working for him. Your life is very much in danger, as is the rest of the world, so go to the Kage. Naruto almost screamed, but stopped himself as his mind caught up to Itachi's situation. Missing Nin had no credibility with anyone, least of all with any of the Kage. The story he had just told Naruto was flatly ridiculous in all aspects. The only reason the blonde hadn't rejected it out of hand was because Madara's continued existence had been confirmed by the Kyuubi. Any of the 4 sitting Kage would laugh off the story before calling their Anbu or attacking Itachi themselves. The renegade Uchiha was short on potential allies, but the possibility forming in Naruto's mind was still far-fetched to the point of being ludicrous. So what? You told me about Madara and Akatsuki years ago, and you're telling me more now. What do you want from me? Naruto asked, feeling his heart rate spike at the possibility of finally, learning why Itachi had singled him out 5 years ago. You are, no doubt, wondering if I placed my hopes for eliminating Madara in an 8-year-old boy, Itachi began. Your potential, both as the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki and in Uzumaki, is greater, even than my own. I had hoped that my warning would help drive you, and that you would become a worthy ally against Madara. It seems my words were not enough, he finished, and Naruto felt the cold edge of failure pierce him. He didn't care about Itachi's hopes and expectations. But he did care about his life. Excuses could be made easily enough, but they could just as easily be dismissed. He was 13, but Itachi had been 13 when he murdered his clan. He was hampered by being in a team, but Itachi had been in a team and simply blew past them in the ranks. Every obstacle to strength that Naruto struggled to overcome in Konoha was one that Itachi had surmounted with ease. So what now? Naruto asked, voice quiet. His knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists at his sides. The renegade Uchiha cocked his head to the side, surveying the blonde. Are you so easily cowed by the idea of your own failure? he asked, a true note of confusion in his voice. I thought you would be more determined in the face of death, Naruto-kun. His knives were in his hands, wind chakra obliterating the room around him before he even processed his reaction. What the fuck do you want me to do, Itachi? He all but screamed. I've trained day and night for years. Taken every scroll I could get my hands on, taken every tip and lesson Konoha decided I could have, and you're gonna tell me I'm not determined enough? Itachi closed his eyes. Determination alone, however great yours may be, will not be enough. The Sharingan wielder's eyes snapped open, but the red pupil had changed. The fully developed three-tomo had morphed into a three-pointed star that resembled a curved Fuma shuriken. Naruto started as the world faded to shades of red, black, and gray. He shivered as a terrible coldness seared him to the bone, his breathing increasing as terror took hold. The renegade Uchiha regarded him for a moment before turning his head to his right, gazing off into the distant plains of the world his eyes had created. Unbidden, Naruto followed his gaze and beheld legends reborn. Thick fingers of wood exploded up from the earth to wrap around a shadowy figure clad in red battle armor that danced around them with precognitive grace. A massive battle fan appeared from nowhere and was snapped out, expelling massive blades of wind that shredded the wood with ease. A second figure burst out of the rain of splinters and Naruto recognized him as Senju Hashirama just as he slammed a Zanbatsu into the shadowy figure's fan in an overhead smash. The Shodai's face was contorted in concentration, sweeping red lines of some sort of jutsu curving from under his eyes up into his Konoha forehead protector. Then that's... Naruto thought, snapping his gaze to the shadowy figure that repelled the sword strike with contemptuous ease before landing a snap kick to the Shodai's chest. Uchiha Madara, Itachi murmured, eyes rooted on his patriarch. The legend of old landed lightly and wove a hand seals before Naruto's mouth dropped open at the unfathomable amount of chakra that suddenly saturated the air. This is our enemy, Naruto-kun, the younger Uchiha stated, but Naruto was scarcely paying him any attention as a meteor rapidly descended from the atmosphere and obliterated the earth where the Shodai had stood. Even before the dust had truly begun to settle, a deafening groan split the air before crashing rock gave way to a titan of pure wood that pulled itself from the rubble. Hashirama stood calmly upon its head, arms crossed and eyes searching for his enemy. Madara wasted no time, and chakra that made Naruto's skin crawl filled the air once more. A gaping hole split the air between the two combatants, air even colder than that which had descended with the vision, bringing the blonde to his knees. A roar of primal fury echoed from the tear in reality, foreshadowing killing intent that Naruto knew all too well. No, he breathed. That's not possible. He was proven wrong less than a second later as the Kyuubi ripped its way out of whatever hell Madara had opened, its fury shaking the very earth it stood upon. And just as suddenly as it had appeared, the vision receded. You now understand just what you are facing, Naruto-kun, Itachi said, somehow just as calm as ever despite the vision of immeasurable strength he had just conjured. Just who your enemy is. Naruto glanced up from where his eyes had settled on the floor. Incredulity didn't even begin to describe his state as he stared down his captor. You want me to fight that? He whispered harshly. He was nothing next to Itachi's might. He might as well have been a newborn baby next to Madara's. As he is now, Uchiha Madara is but a shadow of what he once was, Itachi said. His mind is keen, his agents are numerous and powerful, and it is still beyond the limit of my abilities to kill him alone. He is vulnerable, but as you are you would be nothing but an insect to be swatted. You must do more, the missing Nin said sharply. Your determination, as it is now, is meaningless compared to Madara's strength. Become more than a shadow of the potential that you possess. Cut yourself free of the shackles that bind you, Uzumaki Naruto, and become strong. Itachi was nearly nose to nose with Naruto before the blonde could react. Cling to life as you've never done before. Naruto's eyes widened at the desperation that colored the Uchiha's tone as the Sharingan bored into his eyes. Defend your existence, as if the survival of the world depended on it. For it very well might. Just as suddenly as Itachi had invaded his personal space, he was back in the doorway. The blood red of the renegade's dojutsu had turned to onyx, and his unfrozen clones suddenly went on the offensive. Naruto realized belatedly that the genjutsu must have ended even as Itachi casually snapped the wrist of the first Kage Bunshin, ending its life with a jab to the chest. He sat stupefied as the two remaining clones leapt futilely into action. Less than a moment passed since the door opened, and we've been talking for 10 minutes. This guy, he's unbelievable. Memories of a blow to the head and a slashed throat pulled Naruto from his stupor as the smoke from the final clones dissipated. The Uchiha was unruffled, looking for all the world like nothing had happened since the door had opened. The only sign of strain was the conspicuous lack of Sharingan coupled with a slight tightness around his eyes, and Naruto realized that even 1 month before he wouldn't have noticed even that about his supposed ally. Despite his strides toward strength, despite how far he had distanced himself from his peers since graduation, despite everything, he was still nothing to shinobi of Itachi's caliber. Less than nothing, his mind supplied. And for the first time since the night of the massacre, Naruto realized the true magnitude of his situation. Orochimaru had spoken the truth. Talent and potential alone would leave him dead against the likes of Itachi and the Akatsuki. A cold sweat broke out along the back of his neck, and it had nothing to do with the monstrous, shark-like man who had just stepped behind Itachi. Itachi-san, I expected a bit more of a fight from this one. All those stories. I was looking forward to giving Samahata a nice lunch. The blue man grinned, baring pointed teeth as he reached back and grasped the handle of massive weapon wrapped in bandages. Should I cut off a couple limbs for good measure? The statement forcibly yanked Naruto back to the present. Itachi said nothing, continuing to gaze at Naruto impassively as the fatigue around his eyes slowly regressed. The blonde didn't have time to contemplate his next move before the wall directly to Itachi's left exploded inward and the sound of 1,000 screaming birds nearly deafened him. His eyes widened as Sasuke, and what the fuck was he doing here, darted through the opening, his hand filled with blue lightning and aimed at Itachi's chest. The elder brother didn't even flinch, and Naruto formed a cross-shaped seal as he realized what was about to happen. He narrowed his eyes in concentration, manipulating his chakra into a kage bunshin that formed across the room. Doing the same to his brother, as he had done to Naruto earlier, Itachi effortlessly redirected the no-doubt lethal technique to the side. A sharp crack ended the jutsu as Sasuke's wrist broke, and the younger Uchiha cried out in sudden pain as the renegade turned his momentum into a throw. The clone used its body to cushion Sasuke's impact against the opposing wall, bursting into smoke that Naruto used as cover for a body flicker to appear behind his friend. Not that I'm unhappy to see you, but what are you doing here? Naruto hissed. Uchiha Itachi, Sasuke grunted, directed more at his brother than at the blonde behind him. Naruto's eyes narrowed as black flames began to rapidly spread across Sasuke's neck, and the air became heavy with malice. Hello, Sasuke, Itachi said, calm as ever in the face of his younger brother's palpable rage. It was foolish of you to come here today. I can see it in your eyes. Your hate is not strong enough to defeat me. Sasuke's chakra ignited into blue lightning tinged with black as his voice became low and guttural. Naruto hastily stepped back, away from the jutsu's fallout as Sasuke bit out. I'll show you just how strong my hate is, Itachi. The massive blue man stepped forward, bandaged weapon still strapped to his back. Not to interrupt the touching family reunion, Itachi-san, but you were the one who said we have a time limit. The renegade Uchiha's eyes narrowed for a moment. Indeed. I'll deal with my foolish brother. Apprehend Naru. The missing nin stopped abruptly, tensing as his partner unlatched his weapon and swung it at the wall that separated the room from the hallway. The sound of chakra grinding upon itself greeted Naruto's ears a moment before the wall blew inward, a Rasengan meeting the mysterious blade with a high-pitched whine. Behind it, Jiraiya grinned savagely. Sorry to crash this little shindig, but I just couldn't stay away. The Rasengan suddenly expanded to twice its original size before exploding in a thunderclap of blinding light. Naruto's eyes widened against the blast, just as he felt someone grab him by the back of the collar. His vision blurred, and he found himself halfway down the hallway outside the now-destroyed room. Sasuke was beside him, lightning jutsu aborted in the confusion, and Jiraiya stood in front of them protectively. You alright, kiddo? The Sanin asked over his shoulder as the smoke cleared to reveal the two missing nin, mostly unharmed save for the bandages on the blue man's weapon having burned off. Naruto snorted. Never better. What took you so long? I never leave a woman unsatisfied. I work fast but not that fast, Jiraiya said, a grin in his voice. Distantly, Naruto marveled at how at ease he was in such a perilous situation. He glanced left to see Sasuke still glaring daggers at his brother, though the mysterious black flames had receded from his skin. As for these two, Jiraiya began, his full attention on the missing nin. Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame. I had wondered if the rumors were true. So you are after the containers, huh? The blue man, Kisame, grinned as Itachi surveyed the Sanin. You are the source behind Kakashi's knowledge, the Uchiha stated. Got it in one, kid? Your organization is really something else, what with high-profile scum like you guys being members. Jiraiya turned slightly to glance backwards. Get to a safe distance with you, friend, Naruto. I'll deal with these guys. Don't. Sasuke burst out. Itachi is mine to kill. The Sanin regarded the young Uchiha impassively. Revenge, eh? Can't say you don't deserve it, but these guys are a bit out of your league at the moment, kid. Kisame brought his scaly sword to bear. That's big talk, old man. I wasn't all that impressed with the other one of you Sanin that I met a couple years back. Naruto stared as Jiraiya actually chuckled. Met Orochi-chan, did you? Surprised he didn't feed you to one of his snakes, what with manners like yours. He might be a bastard, but he and I were kicking trash like you around for years before you were born. Enough of this, Itachi cut in. Kisame, this isn't a fight we want today. Let's go. The blue man grimaced but holstered his weapon all the same. One of these days, Itachi-san. Kisame grunted, before turning and sprinting after his partner down the hallway. Oh no you don't! Jiraiya exclaimed, speeding through seals and slamming his palms to the floor. Fleshy pink tissue burst from the walls with a squelch, immediately slowing the fleeing shinobi. A Rasengan formed in his hand in an instant. You guys are already in the belly of the beast. He tore after them in a burst of speed that Naruto hadn't thought the large man capable of, only to stop short as the air inside the walls suddenly spiked in temperature. Pitch-black flame burst from nowhere in front of Itachi, burning a hole 10 feet wide in the fleshy walls in an instant. The Nuke-Nin wasted no time powering through the opening and into the open air. Jiraiya reached the opening a moment later but halted, surveying the still burning black flames with something akin to morbid curiosity. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered, sparing the sprawling town that the Nuke-Nin had disappeared into one last glance. Naruto and Sasuke hurried to his side. You're not going after them? The blonde asked, sending a sidelong glance at his friend. Sasuke was still quivering with rage, but was breathing heavily and cradling his broken wrist gingerly. He wouldn't be attempting anything else. Wouldn't do much good, now would it, brat? Jiraiya said absently, pulling a jar from nowhere and scooping up some of the black flames. I'd chase them, we'd fight some and maybe I'd get one of them, maybe they'd get me. He surveyed the flames for a moment more before the jar disappeared back to wherever he'd pulled it from. Naruto stood in wonderment at how easily he broached the topic of his own death. Not happy with the possibility for sure, but neither did he seem particularly concerned. What's that like, he wondered. In any event, we have a mission to complete and a Hokage to find, the Sanin said with some of his usual cheer before he noticed Sasuke. Oh, he started, face falling into contemplation. You weren't supposed to know about this super secret mission and all that. Ah, I'm sure you won't tell anyone. Sasuke blinked and nodded in bewilderment, shooting Naruto a look filled with confusion. The blonde just shrugged, long since used to his bizarre sensei's antics. Good, Jiraiya said, clapping his hands. Now we should probably get that wrist of yours taken care of. I'm not much of a healer myself, and we can't turn back to Konoha at this point. Well, I guess it's a good thing backup should be here in about 3-2. Dynamic entry was all the warning they had before Jiraiya casually dropped to a knee and a leotard-clad man hurtled through the empty space his head had just occupied. Naruto flattened himself on the ground, just barely avoiding a heel to the face as the man's momentum carried him overhead. Just in time to be late to the fight, he heard Jiraiya mutter, uncharacteristically uncharitable before the man boomed, "Guy. You're just in time." Naruto rested his hand on his forehead to calm his spinning head. He doubted his day was even close to being over. Chapter 19. Concentric Wavelengths. The steady, rhythmic beat of his cane hitting the floor was as familiar as the backs of his hands at this point. It, like everything else, served its purpose. He had long since grown used to his appearance. Age was nothing more than a mark of experience, injuries were smokescreens to hide skill. Regret was unprofessional, and all things could be tools. One merely had to be a shrewd shinobi to use them properly. The rhythm halted as Danzo reached his familiar destination. A lone Anbu with a cat mask stood guard and let him pass without a word. The familiar small, windowless room greeted the elder as the door swung open, revealing a rectangular table in the middle, equidistant from all of the walls, and his company for what was likely the rest of the afternoon waiting for him. Danzo, Yuditane Koharu greeted with a nod that he returned as he sat across from them without fanfare. Koharu, Hamura, he greeted in turn. They sat next to each other on the long end of the table, their usual seats, while Danzo sat alone. He didn't allow his eyes to wander to the head of the table, to the empty chair that was to be filled by the Hokage. His nostrils flared involuntarily and he quashed the grief that momentarily threatened to overwhelm him with an iron will. It doesn't smell right in here, Hamura commented idly, and Danzo chastised himself for being so easily read. Hiruzen had always suffocated them with his damn pipe. Regret is unprofessional, he reminded himself. To business then, Danzo said quietly, pushing thoughts of his greatest rival and oldest friend from his mind. The threat assessment? Koharu prompted, leaning forward. A swipe of blood and a slight application of chakra revealed 2 file folders, both marked as classified. Root's assessment of Orochimaru's capabilities leaves little room for doubt. I won't bother reciting a full list of his transgressions. He has proven himself to be the greatest threat to Konoha's sovereignty since the Third War, Danzo proclaimed, opening the top one. He is considered a level 1 threat, even after Hiruzen's seal? Koharu asked, regardless of how injured he is in the aftermath of their battle. The bandaged elder shook his head in the affirmative. Orochimaru successfully created a village of his own, turned an ally against us, orchestrated an attack on our village proper, and murdered our Kage. Left unchecked, we can assume he will continue working towards our eventual destruction. Putting aside the damage caused to the village, our reputation is in a quagmire. He must be dealt with, an attack that we successfully anticipated and turned to our advantage by routing the invading force, Hamura countered. The reparations we'll receive from Suna will be more than enough to mitigate the damage that was caused by the Ichibi. Truly, other than Hiruzen's death, we are not as disadvantaged as you seem to think, Danzo, and one of the sitting Kage has not been assassinated since the Sandaime Kazekage, and the Nidaime Raikage before him. I need not remind you what happened in the aftermath of both of those deaths. We've no one to declare war on, Koharu stated, referencing both the Third and Second Great Shinobi Wars. Our enemy is known, we have routed the invasion, and our ANBU are pursuing the leftover Odo forces through river country. Hamura interjected, our attention belongs in the north. Jiraiya's latest report on Kumogakure before the exams was indeed troubling. Danzo caught his outbursts with patience developed over a lifetime, even as irritation bubbled to the surface. The fastest way to stall Kumo's advance is to re-establish ourselves as the dominant power on the continent. Eliminating Orochimaru accomplishes this while possibly avoiding a war with Kumo in the next 5 years. A war we can scarcely afford at this time even with Suna's reparations, and a war that is looming ever closer given what we know of EI's movements. The 2 elders opposite him shared a glance. What exactly are you proposing? Koharu asked. Do not misunderstand, Danzo, Hamura said. Eliminating Orochimaru is very much a priority. He is, unfortunately, one of the most powerful and elusive men on the continent, and not to be handled lightly. The resources needed simply to find him could be better spent on preventative measures to guard against a preemptive strike from the north. Finding him is a difficult enough starting place. He's avoided our best scouts for years. Even Jiraiya has difficulty pinning him down, Koharu concurred. Never mind the skill needed to assassinate him. I agree, Danzo said quickly, noting the surprise evident on his peers' faces before it was quickly masked. Loath as I am to admit it, he thought, allowing irritation to color his thoughts before quashing it with practiced ease. There is no efficient way to strike at Orochimaru in our current state. That does not mean that we should not take steps to neutralize him going forward, if not eliminate him entirely. And what, exactly, did you have in mind? Hamura asked. The bandaged elder pushed the first folder containing Root's threat assessment to the side, leaving a second, far thinner folder in its place. He blinked, an uncharacteristic moment of hesitation taking hold of him before he ruthlessly crushed it. It wasn't the first impossible task he would set upon a young shinobi's shoulders, and he doubted it would be the last. Opening it, Uzumaki Naruto's face stared back at him. How much of this do you already know, kid? Naruto twitched as Jiraiya's words penetrated the wind in his ears as they ran through another of Fire Country's expansive forests. The discussion of what exactly had happened in Shakuba town had been summarily tabled while the Konoha Jonin, a Mado guy, had sped off to Konoha with the still injured Sasuke in tow. The Uchiha had left without much protest, but Naruto had received a look that he knew spelled nothing but trouble for him upon his eventual return. How much of what, exactly, sensei? He asked wearily. There was no deliberate evasion in his voice. He honestly didn't quite know where to start. Can't fool these old eyes, the Sanin boasted from next to him, powering from branch to branch at a pace that Naruto had to push himself to match. You were off your game back in that hotel, but not nearly as much as a kid who just learned he's got a couple of S-class criminals after his head. There was no accusation in Jiraiya's tone, a fact that put Naruto more at ease than he thought he'd be. He tensed, expecting the same feeling of panic that had always greeted him whenever he had thought about the Akatsuki, the sound of blood pounding in his ears and the memory of Itachi's Sharingan whenever someone came close to finding out his greatest secret. Only this time there was nothing. Blinking in confusion, he turned to Jiraiya, who was looking at him expectantly out of the corner of his eye. The night of the massacre. He, Itachi, showed up at my apartment. Naruto didn't need to turn his head to know Jiraiya's attention was riveted on him. No proverbial weight was lifted from his shoulders when he said it, such was the magnitude of his task. But Jiraiya had certainly proven himself to be more than capable as both a shinobi and a sensei. If anyone could help him now, even as the clock kept ticking until Akatsuki made their next move, it would be him, so Naruto told him. From Itachi's proclamation to his mastery of the henge, from his first fight with Sasuke to the ill-fated mission to Wave, the Toad Sanin was silent for a few minutes after Naruto finished his tale, leaving Naruto to his thoughts. He had never told anyone of the night of the massacre. Originally, he had wanted to approach the Sandaime. He contained a wince at the thought of the now-deceased old man, but had refrained. Itachi himself had said that Sarutobi wouldn't be able to protect him forever, and he had figured that he might as well get used to fending for himself if he'd have to do it anyway. It rarely came up, after that initial reasoning. What few people did question his sudden passion for excellence were easily assuaged by the fact that a Hokage wannabe would naturally need to be skilled, and it's not like anyone would have believed the truth of the matter regardless. But now, he finally had a teacher that was taking him seriously. Better yet, one of the Sanin. He still had no clue why exactly Jiraiya had singled him out, though it very well could have had to do with his father, but he was far from complaining. The Toad Sage had put enough trepidation into 2 Akatsuki members on his own to send them packing. Not being upfront with the man at this point would have just been stupid, on his part. Hell of a story, kiddo, Jiraiya said, breaking his momentary reverie. I won't bother asking why you didn't bother to tell anyone cause. Well, he trailed off with a rueful chuckle. You believe me, then? Even you would have come up with a better lie than that, Gaki, the Sanin boomed, laughing heartily now. Naruto, quelling his irritation with the older nin, wondered absently at the man's ability to seemingly take everything in stride. Even so, all that said doesn't really change much, does it? Jiraiya cut him off before he could question. I've been tracking these guys for a long time, ever since I got wind of Orochimaru being a member round about 10 years ago. Knew they'd be after you sooner or later, just had to wait till enough of my own problems had been sorted to work with you myself. Naruto blinked, mystified but not entirely surprised, even as a small smile cracked his lips. It was even slightly comforting knowing that something bigger had been in the works for his training. As alone as his fight always seemed, he wasn't. Not truly, at least. Anyway, considering I'd always planned to whip you into something halfway decent, this whole Itachi shtick doesn't change much at all. Though their first move means we've got to get moving, the Sanin murmured. Sensei? Jiraiya turned to him, face set in stone. Real training starts now, kiddo. Even if Itachi doesn't want you dead, there's no telling if he's gonna be the one after you all the time. And we can't take the chance that I'll always be around to bail your ass out of the fire when the bad guys come knocking. The blonde couldn't help the grin that split his lips at Jiraiya's proclamation. Perfect, he crowed mentally. The large man halted on a branch mid-stride, and Naruto mimicked him quickly, eager for whatever tidbit of knowledge was about to be bestowed upon him. We're about 3 hours' travel away from Tanzakagai, the white-haired man said. Your job, from now until we reach it, is to hide from me. Naruto bit down on his no doubt childish retort with effort. The Sanin hadn't yet led him astray with his unorthodox training methods, but he couldn't help wanting to learn a kick-ass jutsu or two in the meantime. I assume this isn't gonna be as simple as I think. Ha! It will be if you actually can hide from me for a decent amount of time, Gaki. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. And a decent amount of time is? Jiraiya stroked an imaginary beard on his chin in mock thought. Let's say 3 minutes to start. You manage that, we up it to 5. And so on. That's it? Naruto thought incredulously. TCH, fine by me, he said, grinning. Without prompting, he shot off into the trees in a burst of raw speed sans chakra. Leaving an easily traceable chakra signature by using Shunshin was a rookie mistake, and Naruto was no rookie when it came to hiding from experienced shinobi. He'd been avoiding patrols in order to go train for years, after all. Coming to a halt after a 30-second sprint, he formed a cross-shaped seal and 3 clones popped into existence. The 4 Narutos formed a tiger seal and the Maisegekyu took hold before all split off into different directions. The original ducked down to ground level and behind a small grouping of shrubbery, being extra careful not to disturb the leaves as he settled in. 39 seconds since I left, he counted off in his head. The decoys would hopefully be enough to shake the footprints he had undoubtedly left, despite his best intentions. And his use of the Maisegekyu no jutsu had improved since before the prelim. Miss me, kid? Jiraiya whispered into his ear, causing Naruto to leap nearly a foot in the air with an undignified yelp. How? Naruto nearly shrieked before the combined memories of his 3 clones simultaneously being dispelled smacked him in the skull, causing him to wince in pain. Not gonna lie to you, Gaki, 40 seconds is more than I expected from you at this point, Jiraiya said, clapping the newly incredulous Chunin on the shoulder. 40 seconds is still ass though. We've got some work to do on your stealth skills. That Maisegekure technique you've got going ain't bad, but I can still see you distorting the air every time you take a breath. Naruto, who approximately 45 seconds ago had thought his stealth skills were at least a few cuts above ass, couldn't refrain from sulking. And I assume you have a plan for all this, sensei? Course I do. Jiraiya's grip suddenly became vice-like before he vaulted both of them back into the branches. Landing without a sound, he said, suddenly serious once more, you've got no chance fighting against the kinda shinobi Akatsuki can send your way right now, and you won't for a while just yet, even with me teaching you. Which means your best bet right now is being able to at least avoid and outrun them if shit gets real. Naruto carefully bit down on his pride. He was no stranger to the notion of Akatsuki being able to utterly obliterate him. Itachi had made that abundantly clear. Yes, sensei, he said, his tone less than enthused regardless of the rationality behind the plan. Buck up, Gaki. Jiraiya crowed. I know a thing about speed and stealth. Ever heard of the Yondain? He was pretty quick and he didn't get that way on his own. The Sanin paused, considering before, well, not entirely on his own, he amended. Naruto couldn't help but snort at the offhand mention of his father's legendary speed, his mood lightening. By all rights, Namake's Minato had been the fastest man in the world when he died, and he hadn't been far from it before he invented his lethal Hiraishin no Jutsu. But first, Jiraiya said once more as he led Naruto off into the canopy towards their destination. Let me tell you about a guy by the name of Miu. You probably know of him by his title, Knight-aimed Tsuchikage. Got to meet him one time. Sarutobi-sensei hated the bastard. Not as much as his successor, of course, but I digress. Finding a member of the legendary 3 had promised to be a harrowing endeavor. They were the Sandame's students, each respected as a Kage-level ninja in their own right. If they didn't want to be found, they wouldn't be. According to Jiraiya, Orochimaru had more than proven that point in the years that he had tracked him across the elemental nations. It was fortuitous for their mission, then, that Tsunade wasn't trying to hide. Naruto assumed she wasn't. At least, what else could explain her contentedly playing poker in the middle of a crowded casino floor with nary genjutsu to conceal her well-known features? Although there was clearly an illusion of some sort, there was no other explanation for how she looked exactly the same as the academy textbooks had shown her in photos. Those photos had been taken at the end of the Second Shinobi World War. Not even the most skilled shinobi could defeat Father Time. Naruto had paused alongside Jiraiya when they had entered the casino in Tanzakagai at seeing the Toad Sanin's teammate clearly in the open. What's your plan, sensei? He asked. Jiraiya had told him that they were looking for Tsunade to be the next Hokage, but hadn't actually explained how they would be going about getting her to come back with them. From what little Naruto knew about Tsunade, she had been outside of the village for some time. If she hadn't come back for her sensei's funeral, how were they to convince her to return? Although Jiraiya hadn't attended the Sandame's funeral either. Neither did I, the blonde mused with a twinge of guilt. He had damn near jumped at the opportunity to leave when the older man had kicked his door in and declared that he nigh aching him on a mission that would very conveniently have them outside the village during the massive ceremony. We're gonna talk to her, kiddo, Jiraiya said, as if Naruto was the dumbest person in the world for asking. Come on. She should be losing by now, which means she'll be on her way out sooner rather than later. Losing? Naruto questioned. She's a kunoichi. Shouldn't she be able to wipe the floor with these guys? He knew that any overt jutsu was banned from gambling halls and casinos, a rule strictly enforced by shinobi, usually jonin, hired by casino managers to keep people in line. Even so, Tsunade was far more skilled than even the elite shinobi wealthy casinos could afford to hire. Simple sleight of hand augmented by a subtle genjutsu would be all it would take to make her a winner in most cases. Jiraiya chuckled lowly as they moved onto the casino floor. You'd think, wouldn't you? Tsunade's always been a by-the-book gambler, though. Unfortunately, because she refuses to cheat, she relies solely on her skill at cards. And she, how do I phrase this? Well, she's god-awful, legitimately terrible, and that bad luck of hers certainly doesn't help, the Toad Sanin said. It's gotten to the point that she's earned herself a nickname, the legendary sucker. Naruto blinked and looked up into Jiraiya's face, surprised to not hear even a hint of his sensei's familiar lecherous tone present. He's actually serious about that nickname. We sure we want her in charge of the village's finances? He asked dubiously as they neared the table in question. A young woman with dark hair and a loose-fitting purple dress sitting behind Tsunade had noticed their approach but said nothing, contenting herself with watching them near. A small pig in her arms squirmed. Tsunade only gambles with her own money, kiddo, don't you worry. Isn't that right, Haim? Jiraiya addressed the back of his old teammate's head as they stopped behind the table. I'm not sure why I bothered to hope you were in town on some other business. Their quarry spoke in a voice that Naruto could only describe as husky. It was lower than most female voices Naruto had heard, and not simply due to the obvious annoyance that laced it. Bet 50,000, she told the dealer, tossing a pile of chips into the pot that made Naruto's eyes bulge. Jiraiya laughed lightly. Not slipping in your old age, I see. And here I thought you wouldn't see us coming, tch. I saw you at the inn where you checked in today, with the attendant you hit on, 4 blocks from here. I saw you before you even got up this morning. The river card was drawn and Tsunade flipped her 2 cards over casually, and turned to face the interlopers fully. What do you want, Jiraiya? She asked before catching sight of Naruto. Her eyes narrowed and her brow wrinkled around a small diamond on her forehead, but she said nothing to the blonde. I was going to offer to take you and Shizen-chan out to dinner, but it looks like you're the one who should be treating. Jiraiya said in a careful tone that confused Naruto even as Tsunade whirled around to see the dealer depositing an extremely large amount of chips in front of her. Your winnings, Tsunade-sama, he said blandly. The Sanin, for her part, simply looked at the chips in askance for a moment before rising abruptly. Shizen, we're leaving, was all she said as she turned from the table and began striding out of the casino. Yes, Tsunade-sama, the dark-haired woman said, deftly sweeping the chips into a small bag with one hand and rising to follow the older woman. The pig was still tightly clutched. Jiraiya fell into step with the woman, named Shizen, apparently, and Naruto hurried to keep up. You've grown up since I last saw you, Shizen-chan, he commented lightly. How long has it been? Over 15 years, Jiraiya-sama, Shizen said as they exited the casino into the busy streets of Tanzakagai. Tsunade was still leading the way, powering through the crowd gracelessly. What is your business with Tsunade-sama? She's been very agitated these past 2 days. And winning now won't help. My cute student and I have a few questions for her, is all, the older man stated, causing Naruto to bristle from behind them. I resent the term cute, he piped, causing Shizen to giggle and shoot him a smile over her shoulder. Now, Naruto-chan. I thought we worked on your manners, Jiraiya chided with all of the exasperation of a beleaguered parent scolding their child. I'll show you manners, you old perv, the blonde mumbled petulantly, doing his best not to rise to the man's bait. Any reply from the Sanin was cut off as they were led into a small restaurant off the main drag. Ignoring the host at the door, Tsunade simply walked to the back and dropped into a circular booth. The 3 others, plus Pig, followed her lead, with Jiraiya muttering something to the stunned host that elicited a vigorous nod and the man hurrying off. A bottle of sake and 3 glasses were set down less than 5 seconds after Jiraiya took a seat. What the hell do you want, Jiraiya? Tsunade asked harshly as the liquor was placed on the table. Her eyes were roiling with an emotion that Naruto couldn't truly identify but could guess at. She looked panicked. But that makes no sense, he thought, knowing to keep silent and let his sensei do the talking here. Jiraiya, for his part, simply poured out 2 cups of the steaming liquor and sat one in front of his teammate. Raising his own cup, he said, to Sarutobi-sensei. Naruto felt his eyes prick slightly at the immediate thought of the old man, and he cast his eyes downward. Tsunade stiffened noticeably at the toast. Her eyes clouded over with another unidentifiable emotion before she picked up her own cup. To Sarutobi-sensei, she whispered, and drank the rice wine. News travels fast, I see. Didn't know you were still in contact with people in the village, Jiraiya said as he poured another 2 cups. Would you like some, Shizen-chan? The dark-haired woman shook her head, opting to favor her master with a closed look. I have my sources, Tsunade responded, taking a second cup of sake. You still haven't answered me, she accused, though the heat had gone out of her voice. Jiraiya cut right to the chase. We need a new Hokage, he said. You were always the most organized of the 3 of us, and the best at dealing with all the clans. You're the last of the Senju and renowned across the continent, a face that would let the world know that Konoha is still strong. The blonde woman blinked, turned her eyes to the sake still in her cup, and brought them up to meet Jiraiya's steady gaze again. She barked a laugh that rapidly devolved into a fit. You must be joking, she managed to get out around her laughter that was rapidly escalating in volume and decreasing in rationality. Jiraiya said nothing as she laughed hysterically to herself, content to sip his sake and stare at his teammate. Naruto, confused, tried to catch his gaze only to give up after a minute and glance back and forth between a steely-eyed Shizen and the hysterical Tsunade. You always were an idiot, Jiraiya, she began after her laughter had abated a minute later. There wasn't a trace of mirth in her gaze as she regarded her teammate. But this is impressive, even by your lofty standards of stupidity, she bit out. I hope those bastard elders put you up to this, because you should know better. Naruto felt his eyes narrow as his hackles rose, even as Jiraiya looked unperturbed by the vitriol. They told me you were the best choice for the seat and I agreed with them, Tsunade sneered. Then you're just an ass, coming here for this. I'm not going back to that place. There's nothing left for me there, the toad Sanin sighed. I know why you left, time, and I know it hurts, but there's so much good that you could do in Konoha, Jiraiya implored, voice quiet. Think of the medical corps. You could finally do the work that you always dreamed of. You could make it so that others don't have to go through what you did with. Don't you dare say their names, the slug Sanin whispered violently. Never thought you'd resort to base manipulation. Don't sit there and talk like you understand what I've been through, don't I though? Her teammate responded softly, and Naruto suddenly got the feeling that he was intruding on a conversation that was far too personal. Shizen looked similarly uncomfortable across the table. Their respective sensei didn't seem to remember that they were there, however. My friends are all dead, my students the same, Orochimaru killed sensei, and you left too. Tsunade averted her gaze at Jiraiya's words. The genius, the princess, and the dead last. Somehow you ended up the best of us, didn't you? She shook her head. Who's the runt? Jiraiya shifted his gaze to Naruto, his lips quirking upward at the abrupt change in subject. Who this? Why, it's my newest apprentice. Introduce yourself, Gaki. Naruto blinked at the apparent dropping of the reason they were there in the first place, but didn't bother to question. Given the intensely personal turn the conversation had taken, it was likely that the two old teammates would be continuing the discussion privately. As curious as he was to learn more about both legendary shinobi, he didn't want to pry into a place where he wasn't wanted. Uzumaki Naruto, he said. A pleasure to meet you, Tsunade-sama. How's that for manners? The older woman cocked her head to the side, considering him. Bit of a stuck-up little runt, isn't he? She asked rhetorically. Naruto felt his eye twitch, all thoughts of manners fleeing from his mind. This bitch? Are all of the Sanin total dicks? He wondered, but I wasn't expecting that name. Tsunade was continuing. Uzumaki him. Looks an awful lot like your last apprentice, Jiraiya. The lingering implication wasn't lost on him, though Naruto suspected that if he wasn't already aware of his heritage it might have gone over his head. Doubt he's as talented though. The young blonde let the dig pass and instead favored his sensei with a searching look. The Sanin, for his part, had a neutral look on his face. He had never gone over his knowledge of his parents with the man. There had always been issues more important than discussing dead people. But now isn't the time, he thought, airing what was likely a classified secret during a meeting that was already tense. Never mind the source of his knowledge, didn't seem to be the better part of valor. I doubt anyone can really measure up to the Yondaime, he finally said, plastering a bland smile on his face for the older woman. TCH. From what I hear he's practically a saint back in Konoha these days. What with that whole Kyuubi business, she said, never taking her eyes from Naruto. The younger blonde felt his earlier anger bubble up once again. Tsunade had to know that the Yondaime's death was a reasonably sore subject with Jiraiya, even after 13 years. It also raised the question of her knowledge of his Jinchuriki status. She certainly seemed focused on him rather intently. A thought struck him, underneath the underneath. Is she deliberately testing to see how much information I know about myself? Or is she trying to create tension between me and Sensei with information that I shouldn't know? He couldn't guess at her motives. For all he knew, it could be anything from overt manipulation to simple information gathering. Still, must be tough having to be compared to a guy like that all the time, Tsunade finished, still staring at him. Or she could just be a bitch, Naruto concluded. Unbidden, Asuma's words from the mission to Wave Country came back to him. Stop comparing yourself to everyone else. If there's anything my experience has taught me, Naruto, it's that the only way to get stronger is to focus on yourself, and what you need to get where you want to go. I'm just focused on me, Tsunade-sama, he demurred. Comparing myself to Namikaze Minato wouldn't make much sense, our lives are too different. And maybe he was more talented than me too, can't change that either. The grin that split his lips was genuine. But I'm gonna be just as strong as he was someday. Stronger too. Believe it, Jiraiya laid a hand on his shoulder, and Naruto looked up to see a proud expression gracing the man's weathered face. Shizen was staring at him too, a bit wide-eyed at his casual proclamation. Tsunade had leaned back into the booth as he spoke, her eyes calculating. Bold words from a runt. You want to be Hokage like him too, don't you? Naruto couldn't help the snort that immediately burst forth. Hokage? Nah. Too much work behind a desk for me. A perfectly manicured eyebrow rose. Huh. Guess you might be smarter than his last apprentice after all. Mind if I join you? Naruto opened his eyes to behold his new companion. Tsunade was stretched out on the concrete roof of the hotel languidly, barefoot and with a bottle of sake in her hand. Blinking, the blonde Chunin realized that it was nighttime. I've been up here for a while, he realized. Looks like you already have, he remarked, not perturbed by her sudden appearance in the slightest. One of his sentry clones had dispelled moments earlier, alerting him to her coming his way. Inwardly, he realized that she must not have cared to try to sneak up on him. The rest of the meal had been somewhat uneventful, with little more about Naruto said after Tsunade's initial probing. Immediately after, the two old teammates had disappeared to parts unknown, presumably to reminisce and discuss Konoha's proposition. Naruto had been left with Shizen and her pig, Taunton, and had gone back to his and Jiraiya's hotel. After a few choice words to the desk attendant, Tsunade's apprentice had upgraded their room to a large, comfortable suite which all four were apparently going to share. The blonde didn't bother to complain or even give the matter much thought. It wasn't his money being spent, and if it got Konoha a new Hokage sooner, then all the better. Some time later, after having claimed his spot in the room, Naruto made his way to the roof to stargaze, meditate, and process what he knew about the final Sanin to make his acquaintance, not necessarily in that order. Tsunade had proven to be an enigma. He knew a bit about her history from the academy and his personal digging on the Sanin, both after Orochimaru had revealed himself in the Chunin exams and when Jiraiya had taken him on as a student. Little in his research could help him guess at what exactly was driving the legendary woman, however. The Shodai's granddaughter, the Sandame's student, a prodigious medic nin who had left her mark on 2 of the 3 shinobi world wars. Not much else was said. Naruto figured it was classified above his pay grade. Suppose I have, the older woman murmured. You don't look surprised to see me, kid. Thought I was quieter than that. Naruto just shrugged, electing to keep silent about his clones. They were all practicing the Maisegekyo while serving as his lookouts, which meant that either they had managed a breakthrough that allowed them to escape Tsunade's notice, she wasn't paying attention, or she was probing like he suspected she had been at lunch. Betting on the last one, he thought with mild irritation. Thinking underneath the underneath was both annoying as fuck and more mentally taxing than he liked to admit. You're also drunk, he said, taking note of a slight red hue tinging her youthful face. Tsunade snorted inelegantly. TCH, hardly. When I'm drunk, you'll know about it, kid. I'll make note of that. The Sanin tilted her head to regard him in the early moonlight. Her eyes, Naruto realized, were as sharp as ever despite her rosy cheeks, and her stare pinned him in place. Distantly, he mused that all 3 Sanin had the ability to effortlessly leave him off kilter. Orochimaru's cold menace, Jiraiya's masked shrewdness, and now Tsunade's penetrating stares that made it feel like he was being dissected. She was seemingly content to stay silent, and he couldn't help but squirm as her eyes bored into him as the seconds ticked by. Her eyes were a honey brown, he noted, with little flecks of gold that he was certain would gleam in the proper light. Unbidden, his eyes were drawn slowly downward to the soft curve of her neckline as her pale skin seemed to glow in the early moonlight. Further down his gaze slid, from her neckline to her exposed cleavage, and he felt himself lean forward ever so slightly. Naruto jerked his head back with a snap, disrupting the internal flow of his chakra with a gasp. Genjutsu. Across from him, Tsunade returned her gaze to the night sky without a word. This woman, the Sanin, Naruto thought, they're unreal. He wasn't the best when it came to genjutsu, and likely never would be, but he knew the signs of one, how to detect them, and how to dispel them quickly. Ino and Asuma had made sure of that. And yet Tsunade had waltzed up and ensnared him for nearly a minute without so much as a hand seal. She isn't even known for her genjutsu. He shook himself, anger at himself for being easy prey clawing at his thoughts. Another test? He growled hoarsely. He recognized his sensei's influence when he saw it. Tsunade shrugged. Jiraiya asked me for a favor. Naruto snorted and shook his head. Course he did, he muttered under his breath. That the only one he asked you for? He snarked, leveling a raised brow at the Sanin. Ha! The old perv wouldn't dare if he knew what was good for him. The blonde woman chuckled to herself. Though I suppose he doesn't, now does he? Naruto turned his eyes skyward as his companion trailed off. It would be just like Jiraiya to test his capacity to handle subtle genjutsu by sending a gorgeous woman to distract him. The man was apparently the master of devious training methods. Their stealth game of cat and mouse on the way into Tanzakagaya was just one example, one more thing to work on. He was certainly grateful that his sensei was clearly taking his training seriously, frustrating as it was at times. Jiraiya knew what he was up against better than most, having tracked Akatsuki for a few years back when Orochimaru had been a member. And he certainly had a proven track record of powerful apprentices. The thought of the yondaime brought Naruto's musings to a halt. Blue eyes flickered over to Tsunade briefly, considering. Jiraiya had undoubtedly been talking to her for much of the day about their mission, but damn if he wasn't curious himself. "Why'd you leave?" he asked bluntly. He doubted his abilities at extracting information from people extended to legendary ninja. The honey-brown eyes were locked on his before he could blink, and the gaze was far less inviting than it had been the first time. "That's a pretty personal question, kid," she said quietly, "and you walked up here and put a genjutsu on me without prompting," Naruto thought. Beauty aside, he had no desire to have sexual thoughts about his sensei's teammate. She was old. "Just curious," he said instead. "You haven't been in the village for at least 15 years. Didn't think that was standard for future Kages," Tsunade snorted. "And who says I'm a future Kage?" The Chunin felt his brow furrow. "Well, I mean that's why we're here. Feel like your village asking you to come back and be Hokage isn't something that you can, well, ignore," he said, entirely confused. "TCH. Those elders can rot in hell for all I care. I'll tell you the same thing I told Jiraiya, kid. There's nothing left in Konoha for me. But you must ask yourself this: what allegiance does a man owe to a village that does not appreciate him? None." Orochimaru's words came to mind without prompting. Naruto grimaced at the thought of the traitor's words. It seemed the Sanin weren't all that different. In the end, Orochimaru defected, Tsunade left, and even Jiraiya spent minimal time in Konoha. "What a team," he mused. "That's it, then?" he asked, intrigued. "I didn't think Jiraiya-sensei would let it go that quick." Tsunade shrugged in his periphery, taking a pull from her bottle. "I may give the pervert shit for being an idealist, but he knows a lost cause when he sees one." Naruto nodded, trying to quell the mix of confusion and irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "Just seems odd to me, you know. Your Gramps was the Shodai and your sensei was the Sandaime. Why wouldn't you follow in their footsteps? Being Hokage is a death sentence," Tsunade declared immediately, as if she didn't even have to think about it. "Anyone who wants that hat is a damn fool," she said, bitterness seeping through every word. Her eyes snapped to Naruto for the second time that night, pinning him once more. "But you know that already, don't you? All that talk about wanting to be better than the yondaime, and even you don't want to Hokage." She shifted so that she faced the young blonde fully, and Naruto felt the full weight of her attention fall on him for the first time. "You joked about being behind a desk, but I could see it in your eyes," she continued. "You want to be Hokage as much as I do, so why bother asking?" Naruto shook himself. "They're also not asking me to take the job," he murmured. "That's kinda it, though. I don't know what happened to you, don't really want either, but whatever it is, they know about it, and they're asking you anyway. The village wouldn't do that unless they really needed you." Tsunade barked a laugh. "You have no idea what they make you give, kid. They'll ask for your life, and that's fine. That's what you sign up for when you graduate, even though you don't know it. But then they ask for your friends' lives, and your families, until you're the only one left, and then they ask for more. That's what being Hokage is. And for your sacrifice you get your face carved in stone," she concluded, raising her sake in a mocking toast. "Most don't even get that much," she whispered into the night. Naruto leaned back, considering the Sanin's words. It wasn't much more than he had already considered himself, back when he learned of his parentage from the Kyuubi. It took a certain kind of person to seal a demon into your newborn son, knowing the likely consequences. Even among shinobi, who had loyalty bred into them from their first academy lecture, that was above and beyond. But that's who the Hokage were. The Shodai had died defending his troops from Salamander Hanzo's first, unexpected offensive at the outset of the First Great War. The Nidaime had fallen to Kumogakure's Kinkaku force, sacrificing himself so that his team could pass word of Kumo's treachery on. The Sandaime sacrificed his soul to stop Orochimaru. And his father? A small, sardonic smile split his lips at the thought. "I used to want to be Hokage," he said quietly. "The villagers hate me because of the Kyuubi, so I figured that if I became Hokage then they'd have no choice but to love me. But that's not what being Hokage is about. He's the village's greatest hero, and they don't even know what he gave up, not really. Honestly, Naruto didn't quite know what he thought of Namake's Minato most days. As much as he hated what his father had done to him, he couldn't help but feel an inkling of pride for the man. He turned back to the Sanin to find her wide eyes locked on him and roiling with an emotion he couldn't name. The Chunin inclined his head slightly. To be Hokage is to be the least selfish person in the village, he declared softly. Mentally, he had put himself in his father's shoes many times. Would he have been able to sacrifice not only himself, but his only child for the betterment of the village? The village has to come first, no matter what. And I don't know if I can do that. That's why I don't want to be Hokage, he told Tsunade. The older woman regarded him carefully for nearly a minute, a glint in her eye that hadn't been present before. Naruto held her gaze with ease, daring her to challenge his declaration. She nodded after a while, turning to stare out into the night, presumably lost in her musings. The younger blonde settled himself after a few minutes, reflecting. She hadn't reacted overmuch to his hinted knowledge of his parentage, which either meant she had known or suspected from the moment they had met. Jiraiya probably confirmed it to her, he deduced. Jiraiya was right, Tsunade said without prompting, breaking him from his musings. The young blonde turned to her expectantly. You are smarter than you look. Naruto felt his eye twitch, but couldn't help the laughing snort that escaped him. Beside him, Tsunade smiled, settling in to watch the stars once more. Chapter 20, Fortune's Gate. Wake up, kid! We've got a problem. Naruto sat up abruptly from his lying position on the futon, knives finding their way to his knuckles out of reflex. Wah, he started, head on a swivel to take in the suite he had spent the last 2 nights in. Jiraiya was leaned up against the far wall, breathing heavily and being tended to by a harried-looking Shizun, while Taunton squealed in displeasure at being ignored. Tsunade was nowhere to be seen. Sensei? Naruto asked, sheathing his knives given the lack of immediate danger. I need you to send clone sentries out into the city. Tsunade's gone. The blonde narrowed his eyes, seeing a guilty look pass over Shizun's face even as her healing chakra passed over Jiraiya. He formed a cross-shaped seal and 6 clones burst into existence. Gone? The last 2 days had been something approaching pleasant since their impromptu conversation on the roof. He had made sure not to mention Konoha's offer in her presence anymore. Jiraiya undoubtedly had his own strategy that he had no desire to interfere with. He'd probably just mess it up. In the end, he actually got along with the third Sanin rather well. She openly mocked Jiraiya, leaving the man with less time to annoy the ever-living shit out of him when he was teaching, so she couldn't be all bad. The toad Sanin sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. She left early this morning to meet with Orochimaru. Naruto felt his eyes widen in shock and anger. Shizun said the meeting would likely be on the east side of the city. Send your clones to scout it. 2 of the 6 immediate disappeared in Shunshin while the other 4 held a tiger seal for the Maisegekure, quickly disappearing from view save a small shimmer when they moved. Naruto narrowed his eyes in consternation at the difficult jutsu as the final 4 took off in their own Shunshins. She's meeting with him? The blonde bit out, addressing Shizun directly. What is he even doing here? Shizun dropped her eyes to the ground as she took her hands off Jiraiya's back. Orochimaru and one of his subordinates approached Tsunade-sama early in the week, asking her to heal his arms that had been damaged in his fight with the Sandaime. They left before I could convince her to attack them, promising to be back within the week to get her answer. And apparently they've come to collect, Jiraiya butted in, drawing himself up to his full height with some effort. Why the fuck would she heal his arms? Naruto asked, incredulous. He attacked Konoha. He killed her sensei. There's no guarantee that she will. Tsunade was always pretty guarded in her motivations. Jiraiya chuckled darkly. And ruthless in her execution. She slipped something in my drink that fucked my chakra up pretty bad. Whatever she's planning, she doesn't want anyone to interfere. Naruto processed the bad news quickly, trying to wrap his head around the delicate situation with some of the equanimity Jiraiya always managed to display. Motivations don't matter right now, he told himself. Focus on the here and now. Why she was doing what she was doing meant little in the face of the potential fallout. Worst case, she healed Orochimaru. Second worst case, she turned on him and ended up dead in the process. What did the subordinate look like? He asked Shizun quietly, not missing Jiraiya's small smile at the pertinent question. Average height, grayish silver hair, and glasses. Blue eyes narrowed. Kabuto, he declared. The one you ran into during the exams, Jiraiya confirmed. What do we know about him? Naruto shook his head. Not a lot. Definitely an infiltration specialist. Went to 7 Chunin exams as a Konohanin and had at least B-ranked information on members of multiple villages. No idea about his combat abilities, Jiraiya hummed as he stretched lightly in the middle of the suite before taking a deep breath. Naruto shifted as the feeling of a warm blanket washed over him as Jiraiya's chakra suddenly filled the room. Sounds like a slippery one. If he was carrying around B-ranked info, then he's got some skill to protect it, he said, echoing Naruto's own thoughts from back in the exam. He sighed, shaking his head as the chakra receded. Assume we have an A-ranked threat on our hands. And me without full use of my chakra. Lovely. The toxin should take at least a few more hours to run its course, Jiraiya-sama, Shizen said quietly. I've sped your metabolism as much as I could without risking permanent damage to your body. Don't worry about it, Shizen-chan. It'll take a bit more than a spiked drink to keep me down, for I am Jiraiya, the Sanin declared, striking a pose with his arm outstretched ridiculously. Tsunade's assistant cracked a smile at the display while Naruto just shook his head. The blonde envied his sensei's unprecedented ability to keep his cool regardless of the severity of the situation. Naruto, the older man spoke, suddenly all business. When we make contact, you and Shizen will have to field Kabuto. Leave Orochimaru to me, even with your chakra? Jiraiya grinned. I've had worse odds. And if his arms are still fucked when we show up, it might actually be a fair fight. The blonde nodded hesitantly before wincing in pain as 2 sets of memories shoved themselves into his head simultaneously. I hate it when they do that. We've got something, sensei. 2 of my clones found wreckage on the southeast side of the city. A wall and half a building have been completely destroyed. Heh. Sounds like our girl. Lead the way, Gaki. Naruto spared the 2 ranking shinobi a glance before performing a seamless shunshin that left him on the roof of the hotel. The others joined him less than a second later, and the blonde wasted no time in speeding away in the direction his clones had found the disturbance in yet another body flicker. Blue eyes strained to stay completely open despite the rushing wind and blurred surrounding that the shunshin naturally led to. The jutsu was fast, too fast in some ways, and Naruto wasn't proficient enough with it to make much use of it in full combat. Something Jiraiya apparently had half a mind to fix at the earliest opportunity, or so the man had said on their way to Tanzakagai. An idea for wind manipulation struck him in the moment, but he quickly shelved it for later. They had arrived in seconds at what looked to have been, perhaps as recently as minutes ago, a reasonably affluent quarter of the city. Civilians were crowding the rubble frantically, searching for anyone who might have been unlucky enough to get caught in the crossfire. Yup, that's Tsunade's work all right, Jiraiya declared, taking in the destruction. Looks like they took things outside the city to the south, if the direction of the damage is any indication. I'll take point on this one, Naruto. The Sanin took off quickly, following the trail of rubble into the countryside with Shizen hot on his heels. Naruto spared one last glance at the floundering civilians before following suit. He powered himself to run even with Shizen a few moments later. Her face was creased with worry, undoubtedly for her master's well-being given the signs of a fight left over in the city. He'd have to let her lead if it came to a fight. She'd been under Tsunade's tutelage for over a decade. If the final Sanin was even half as good a sensei as Jiraiya was, she'd be a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. A snarl split his lips at the prospect of paying Orochimaru back for the crimes he'd committed against his home. For all he railed against the general populace in his own mind, he didn't care to see them senselessly slaughtered at the whims of a madman. The heavy feeling of latent chakra washed over Naruto abruptly. Blue eyes flicked to his sensei in time to see a change come over the man's bearing. Go time. One moment, Jiraiya was leading them, the next, he was gone at a speed Naruto hadn't thought the large man capable of. Fast. Shizen followed without hesitation and Naruto, seeing a clear path, dashed forward into Shunshin to keep up. He landed less than a second after Tsunade's apprentice, 2 steps behind Jiraiya. The blonde Sanin was on her knees, shivering and covered in blood behind her loyal teammate. Across the plain, Orochimaru stood next to a serious Kabuto, a grin twisting his pale face. Looks like we're just in time, Jiraiya boomed, stepping forward. Can't say I'm happy to see your pasty face again, Orochimaru. Jiraiya, the snake Sanin all but hissed, grin widening. What a lovely reunion! How long has it been since we've all been together? Heh, not long enough clearly. Though I was sorry I missed getting a chance to cave your skull in back in Konoha. The snake Sanin just grinned wider, his lips stretching unnaturally. I see your manners haven't improved after all these years. That's no way to greet an old friend, Orochimaru chuckled. And you've brought young Naruto-kun as well. You performed most admirably during the invasion, child, he complimented. Naruto felt his lip curl at the sound of the man's voice, but did nothing other than draw his knives in anticipation. Slippery as he was, Orochimaru would undoubtedly use anything the blonde said against him. Losing his head here could lead to actually losing his head. Indeed, you defied even my expectations. Purgara didn't stand a chance, did he? The snake sighed theatrically. I'm afraid our business with Tsunade-chan is complete, Kabuto-kun. Naruto didn't have time to react as Shizen reached out and pulled him and Tsunade to the right. The world blurred for less than a second as she carried them in shunshin away from two massive plumes of smoke that the blonde hadn't even processed. Summoning, he realized. Two brown snakes the size of most buildings in Konoha dove into the other cloud that had been left over, undoubtedly from Jiraiya's summoning. A giant, magenta-colored toad wearing a black kimono leapt past them with surprising grace, deflecting the bite of one of the snakes with a shield it pulled from its back. Heads up! Shizen called, a split second before Naruto's reflexes had him diving out of the way of a palm that was covered in visible, glowing chakra. He turned his dive into a roll and the hien roared to life in his hands as he righted himself. Kabuto stood between Naruto and Shizen, who was still covering Tsunade's front, and smiled maliciously. I had thought to test myself against one of the Sanin today, but I suppose you two will have to do. He disappeared in a blur that Naruto's immature eyes couldn't track. Senses screaming, he spun in place, lengthening the hien into 5-foot whips that circled him defensively, forcing Kabuto to abort. Inventive, the spy said from just outside the wind's range. He torqued his body suddenly, neatly avoiding a palm thrust from Shizen. He jumped back a step, parrying another thrust with ease. I would suggest leaving this to the adults, however. This is no place for you, Naruto-kun. The spy leapt backwards to avoid a flurry of Shizen's blows. The black-haired woman ran through seals and spit a hail of tiny needles from her mouth at Kabuto, forcing him to the left. Come now, Naruto-kun. Leave this business to the adults, he heard the masked enemy say, voice dripping with condescension. Truly, this is no place for genin, even on as talented as you. The Foyenbyu's words from the day of the invasion rang in his head with the force of an earthquake. It was you, Naruto breathed, the speech patterns and voice aligning in his mind. It was you! He screamed, rage for Yamato's death bubbling to the surface. Horse monkey bird. Naruto clapped his hands together in front of his mouth and exhaled a sharpened cloud of dust that sped toward the spy, pulverizing the ground to dirt particles as it passed. Go! He told Shizen, who dashed back into the fray as Kabuto strafed to his right to avoid the Fujin no Jutsu. Naruto hung back, mind working furiously to find an opening. Kabuto was clearly a jonin, and for all of his advances with Jiraiya, he couldn't go toe-to-toe with the man. Close combat would see him dead in a matter of seconds, given the gap in speed and the chakra covering the man's hands. The blonde wasn't about to chance getting caught by that. Ninjutsu it is. The students of two Sanin clashed in a flurry of taijutsu, their hands glowing matching shades of green as chakra scalpels sought to rend flesh. Knocking one of her thrusts aside, Kabuto pivoted and jabbed 2 fingers of green chakra into Shizen's right shoulder, causing her to cry out. Speeding through seals as fast as he could, Naruto spat a bullet of wind at the small space between the two combatants. The low-level futon technique served its purpose, and Kabuto jumped back to avoid being hit, allowing Shizen to dart back to Naruto's side. Forming a familiar cross-shaped seal, 3 Narutos burst into existence, and rushed forward to blitz the spy in individual shunshins, knives drawn. The original turned to his ally expectantly. He's better than me in close quarters. We need a coordinated assault to take him out, Shizen declared as she healed whatever damage Kabuto had inflicted to her shoulder. My clones can flush him out, Naruto said, forming 6 more as the memories of his now dispatched clones made themselves known. They disappeared in body flickers to engage the spy once more. My ninjutsu can keep him out of range for a while, but I can't keep up with his speed long term. In a contest of raw speed, Naruto could probably go toe-to-toe with Kabuto. The man wasn't that fast. But the blonde's reflexes weren't good enough to allow him to battle it out in shunshin given the lack of sight that the jutsu left him with. Luck wouldn't carry him far in this fight. Am I interrupting something? Kabuto's smooth voice spoke from behind Naruto and Shizen, a moment before one of Naruto's clones managed to dispel itself in a warning. He didn't dispel them. Naruto realized too late. They spun in time for Naruto to catch a heel to his chest that sent him flying towards the still-down Tsunade. He hit the ground hard and rolled, finally finding purchase with his hands and vaulting himself into a defensive stance in front of the incapacitated Sanin. Blue eyes shone with renewed rage as he looked for an opening. The spy parried Shizen's point-blank saban thrust with a kunai, a deft twist of his wrist divesting the black-haired woman of the weapon before he jabbed his chakra-covered palm into her stomach hard enough to send her sprawling. She rolled to a stop some distance away, breathing harshly, but didn't move to stand. Kabuto turned from her downed form to regard Naruto, cocking his head to the side and pushing his glasses further up his nose. A slow, mocking smile spread across his face as he beheld the beleaguered blonde, almost inviting in its condescension. If only the arrogance wasn't warranted, Naruto grimaced and turned his head to regard the blood-covered Tsunade with a sneer Sasuke would have been proud of. Blue eyes locked with honey brown for a moment before he turned back to face Kabuto. Some Hokage you'll make, he growled. 2 Kage Bunshin formed in response to his cross-shaped seal. Cover me! He bit out, and rushed forward toward Kabuto's waiting form. Naruto covered the distance in less than a second, but was still beaten to the spy by a wind-sheathed kunai thrown by one of his clones. Kabuto ducked the thrown knife with ease, but was immediately forced to leap over a sweep of his legs by the original. Naruto dropped to the ground and pushed off with his hands, moving to take advantage of the spy's momentarily airborne state. Crossed arms blocked his plyometric thrust kick with ease, though it succeeded in knocking the glasses-clad man higher in the air where he was immediately met by a second Naruto, who had substituted with the thrown kunai. A two-handed smash, blocked yet again, brought the spy back down to earth where he immediately rushed forward in a seamless shunshin toward the original. Naruto avoided a chakra-covered palm with a shunshin of his own, and only had time to catch a glimpse of Kabuto's grin before the world was reduced to a blur of high-speed motion. The blonde blurred to the left, towards a spot instinct and chakra senses told him Kabuto would appear in less than a moment. He appeared a split second before the gray-haired spy, but his chakra-enhanced hook was neatly redirected by the back of Kabuto's forearm. Naruto channeled chakra to his feet, sticking himself to the ground in order to pivot hard and spin a devastating elbow at the man's face. But Kabuto was no longer there. The gray-haired spy reappeared at Naruto's flank in yet another body flicker, chakra scalpel moving to eviscerate the blonde, forcing Naruto to perform a shunshin of his own to avoid it, and the chase was on once more. Naruto chained 3 body flickers together to evade Kabuto's deadly hands, eyes tearing up as he battled tunnel vision. I can't keep this up, he thought desperately, ducking a swipe at his head on instinct and nearly overextending himself in an immediate counterattack that was late by as much time as it took to blink. I have the chakra to do this all day, he knew, disappearing in another shunshin to avoid a strike at his heart. But I'm damn near running blind. It was a minor miracle that they were fighting on an open plain. Were they in a forest, the blonde suspected he'd have plowed head first into a tree by now. In the back of his mind, he realized that Kabuto was likely toying with him on Orochimaru's orders. The thought didn't offer much comfort. His luck finally ran out as Kabuto appeared out his body flicker a moment before he did, and the blonde was forced to perform the fastest kawarimi of his life to escape the worst of the damage. He reappeared 5 meters behind Kabuto, holding his chest, and watched detachedly as the large rock he had substituted with was pulverized to dust by the man's strike. The spy turned to him languidly, the mocking smile returning to his young face as he pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose in what looked to be a habitual tic. Not bad, Naruto-kun, he complimented. I didn't expect you to last quite so long at such speeds. The blonde spat blood and sneered. You'll find I'm full of surprises, he said. Kabuto's eyes widened in sudden realization, and the spy deftly leapt over a thrown Fuma shuriken one of Naruto's clones hurled at his back. Why would I use a shuriken instead of ninjutsu? He wondered even as a second shuriken appeared from the shadow of the first, causing Kabuto to roll right to dodge it. The first angled through the air and implanted itself in the ground directly to Naruto's left before exploding in a puff of smoke to reveal another one of his clones. Try to keep up, boss, the clone on the left told him, turning to face Kabuto, who was evading the other Kage Bunshin's hail of weapons with seeming ease, and running through hand seals. Naruto's eyes lit up in recognition of his clones, his plan, and sped through his own hand seals fast enough to keep up. I even surprise myself sometimes. Katon, Gokaki no Jutsu, Futon de Tapa. The resulting firestorm wasn't nearly as massive as his Kyuubi and Anbu-aided effort back during the invasion, undoubtedly his clone's inspiration for the combo, but it was still far more impressive than either of the 2 C-ranked jutsu could have been on their own. The wall of flame covered the distance between the 2 Narutos and Kabuto in the blink of an eye, obscuring the spy from view. The memories of the clone that had thrown the shuriken hit Naruto's mind, alerting him to Kabuto's movements. 4 seals found Naruto dropping into the earth beneath his feet using the first Doton technique Jiraiya had bothered to teach him. Being beneath the earth was an odd feeling, but he could easily make out each footfall. Jiraiya and Orochimaru's summons were clearly still clashing some distance off, and the rapid footfalls indicative of a Shunshin were quickly approaching his remaining clone. The clone strafed backwards from the spy's offensive, and Kabuto gave chase swiftly. Now! Naruto erupted from the ground, gripping his wrist as his chakra began to whirl, racing forward in a Shunshin at Kabuto's exposed back. The spy whirled around at the last moment, eyes wide, and Naruto relished the momentary surprise on the treacherous man's face as the Rasengan impacted his chest. The blonde felt a light tap above his heart but paid it no heed as the spiraling sphere ground into Kabuto before detonating in a blinding flash that sent the man hurtling backwards and into a boulder some meters away. He grinned as the final clone dispelled itself, spitting blood from Kabuto's earlier strike to his chest. Get up from that one, fucker. Naruto turned from the form of the downed spy to face the ongoing battle of summons some distance away, taking in the devastation with a glance. Jiraiya's horned toad looked to be locked up with the twin brown snakes Orochimaru and Kabuto had summoned, one pinned beneath its Susumuda while it fended off advances from the other with its shield. Plans of how best to help his laboring sensei had only just started to form in his mind before Naruto felt a sharp pinch in his chest, right where Kabuto had tapped him upon being hit with the Rasengan. What did he? Was all Naruto had time to think as the world spun abruptly and he saw no more. He had always been a patient man, but this weakness couldn't be abided for much longer. He ducked his old teammate's thrust kick with contemptuous ease, and a quick application of chakra saw his body wrapped tightly around Jiraiya's, squeezing the life out of him in seconds, only to have him replaced by a log and a seamless kawarimi. How utterly predictable, Orochimaru mused, having gotten bored with the fight nearly from the outset. Truly, it wasn't even an enjoyable fight, the two of them reduced to this level. He knew Jiraiya well enough to know the man agreed with him on principle, though he'd never admit it. Stubborn fool, he thought without vitriol. Indeed, the only redeeming factor was Naruto-kun's clash with Kabuto just inside the fringes of his awareness. Your spy is competent, Jiraiya complimented, swinging a fist that normally would have had the strength to tear his head from his shoulders. As it was, he managed to maneuver his dead, useless, left arm into its path in a block. Had the arm been receiving any blood flow, it likely would have only bruised. You noticed, Orochimaru simpered, swinging his other dead, useless, arm at his old teammate before twisting himself into a kick that had Jiraiya skidding backwards on the head of the pinned snake upon which they fought. Above them, Jiraiya's toad was locked in combat with his second summon. Kabuto-kun could give Sakumo's boy a run for his money, old friend. On a good day, of course. And yet Naruto isn't dead, the white-haired man returned, voice dripping with suspicion. He knows me too well, Orochimaru mused amusedly. Outwardly, he chuckled. I abhor waste, Jiraiya. Naruto-kun has so much potential that it would be shameful if he was cut down before he could reach it. Surely you see that. Of course I do, his old teammate said, face set in stone. But that doesn't explain what the hell you want with my student, now does it? He felt his lips stretch into a wide smile. Only the best of things, I assure you, he said, delighting in the frustrated countenance that came over Jiraiya's face. He blinked, chakra working in overdrive to twist his body out of the way of his old teammate's flying knee. He regains his strength quickly. You know he'll never join you, Jiraiya said matter-of-factly, blocking his return kick with ease. Promises of power won't tempt him, Orochimaru. Not after what you've done, won't they? He and I are allied against a common enemy, and I am the greatest resource he could possibly have to fight them. The snake Sanin smirked. I know the Akatsuki better than anyone else, Jiraiya. Far better than you. They're all old friends, you see, Jiraiya grimaced, fighting his own body as it rebelled against Tsunade's toxin. That doesn't change what you've done. He blurred in a shunshin, sweeping Orochimaru's legs and landing a knee to the long-haired man's back that sent him skyward. You attacked Konoha, and that's not easily forgiven, team. Katon Enden! His kawarimi left nothing but ashes falling on Jiraiya's white hair. Orochimaru rose from the skin of the snake languidly, unbothered. You overestimate the boy's patriotism. Konoha has done naught but spurn his existence from the moment the Kyuubi was sealed into him. Those people mean nothing to him. TCH, I see you haven't changed much either. Still projecting your twisted worldview onto everyone around you, Jiraiya declared, his arms held loosely at his sides. Orochimaru could see the muscles tensing and relaxing beneath the man's haori, however, and knew his old friend could strike at any time. He won't abandon his home over some petty villagers. He's his father's son. Orochimaru felt his lips twist in a reflexive sneer at Namake's Minato's mention. For all his hatred of what the man represented, failure, he couldn't help but respect the man's ruthless efficiency. The boy had been a prodigy hailed even higher than he had been, and the yellow flash had certainly lived up to his hype. He had envied Jiraiya's luck in getting to teach the boy, though Namake's had emulated his sensei's style in only the most superficial of ways. There was a certain satisfaction in imparting knowledge onto one's student, a truth he had realized with Anko, despite her failings. He only hoped his next student would prove to be a more satiating endeavor. Speaking of the boy, Orochimaru thought, a swell of chakra at the fringe of his awareness attracting his notice. He turned in time to catch sight of a raging firestorm erupt from twin blondes and raced towards his subordinate. Magnificent, he hissed as Kabuto powered around the worst of the combination jutsu. His father's son indeed, he noted with mixed feelings, watching the boy spring from the earth and rush Kabuto's blind spot, Namake's Rasengan whirling in his hand. The boy was nearly unprecedented. A barely 13-year-old chunin with 2 A-ranked kills, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, the heir to the potent chakra of the Uzumaki, and the son of the Yondaime. "You've done well by the boy, Jiraiya," he complimented as the Rasengan detonated with a thunderclap that sent his subordinate flying into a boulder. "He will make a fine student. If he survives, of course," he mused aloud, his eyes not missing Kabuto's counter. Jiraiya abandoned their farce of a fight faster than he could blink, reappearing by Naruto's side. Orochimaru took the opportunity to perform his own body flicker to check on his subordinate. "Naruto-kun is full of surprises," Kabuto coughed, still prone against the boulder. The explosion had burned away most of his standard purple shirt, and the impact had jarred the Odo headband from his forehead and cracked his glasses. Torn and bloody flesh was knitting back together in front of his very eyes, however, burns fading as new skin cells rapidly formed. What a terrifying ninjutsu, he thought as his subordinate spit blood with a grimace. It appeared the Rasengan did more than just superficially wound its victims. A delightful trait in a lieutenant and student, I assure you, Kabuto-kun. I expect you'll witness many more of the boy's surprises, provided your little counterattack hasn't killed him, Orochimaru said, the evenness of his voice belying his murderous irritation. The gray-haired teen met his stare with familiar deference, though insolence shone through the haze of pain he was no doubt experiencing. "A reflex, Orochimaru-sama. I apologize for my mistake." "You do not make mistakes, Kabuto-kun," the snake Sanin stated plainly. Between Danzo, Sasori, and himself, the boy was as sharp a shinobi as any on the continent. "I hope, for your sake, that this little experiment of yours turns out how you expect it to." Kabuto smiled demurely as he gingerly rose to his feet. "It appears Tsunade has recovered," was all he said. "Indeed." Orochimaru turned to see his 2 teammates, and Shizen huddled over the young chunin's form. Tsunade's hands glowed green as she worked desperately to undo any damage that Kabuto had inflicted. The snake Sanin felt the lingering irritation at his subordinate's test fall away as Naruto visibly twitched under his teammate's expert attentions. "What, exactly, did you do to the boy?" he asked, curious. Kabuto hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the sight of the very much alive chunin in spite of his own actions. "Testing a hypothesis. I severed his aorta, Orochimaru-sama." Orochimaru felt his eyes widen at the implications. A severed aorta would see the victim dead in less than 10 seconds as the brain stopped receiving blood from the beating heart. Naruto had been prone for nearly a minute, and Tsunade, as gifted as she was in healing ninjutsu, could not reverse death. "Well now," he started, lips parting in a smile that hurt his cheeks to sustain even as his teammates turned as one to face him, wrath written across their faces. "I think, Kabuto-kun, that things are about to get interesting." He came to as if he had simply been awoken from sleep in the morning. Electric blue eyes blinked open calmly to behold the similarly blue mid-afternoon sky, interrupted only by white clouds floating peacefully across his field of vision. Shikamaru might be onto something. All too soon, the familiar sounds of combat reached his ears, snapping him from his serene reverie. He sat up quickly and gasped, reaching a hand out to the ground to steady himself as exhaustion viciously asserted itself in his body. Bracing himself, he gingerly rose to his feet, careful not to move too quickly and topple over. The Sanin weren't far from him. Jiraiya and Tsunade stood next to each other, and behind them stood their famed boss summons. Gamabunta towered even higher than the toad Jiraiya had summoned earlier in the fight, pipe clenched in his mouth as he glared balefully down upon Orochimaru and an injured-looking Kabuto. Katsuyu was arrayed in what Naruto assumed to be an offensive position, coiled behind Tsunade with her antennae swaying agitatedly. The traitor's infamous summon was nowhere to be seen. Signs of their battle were abundant. Massive craters where the summons had no doubt clashed littered the formerly peaceful plains. A hole that was 5 times as wide as Naruto was tall gaped, signifying some measure of subterranean transit. Gotta be Manda, the blonde concluded. His eyes narrowed as he picked up the feeling of someone using Shunshin, swiftly palming a kunai, only to relax as Shizen appeared a moment later. What did I miss? He asked hoarsely. The black-haired woman surveyed him with something approaching wonderment, prompting Naruto to raise his eyebrows and question. She shook herself slightly. Tsunade-sama and Jiraiya-sama engaged Orochimaru and Kabuto for a few minutes, she said, turning back to regard her master. Naruto quashed a swell of annoyance. He couldn't rightfully expect a full play-by-play account of the fight. His eyes shifted to the gray-haired spy, narrowing in cold fury. How's Kabuto still alive? I got him dead center of his chest. His skill in medical ninjutsu allowed him to preempt your attack, apparently. The damage was already healing when your jutsu struck him, Shizen said tentatively, as if she was still wrapping her head around such a technique. You gotta be kidding me. First Gaara's ultimate defense and Shikaka manifestation, now a guy with the ability to heal wounds that hadn't even happened yet? Blue eyes surveyed the destruction of the plains and turned to regard the now conversing Sanin with no small amount of trepidation. How do I keep ending up in these situations? The fight looked to be over, the 3 Sanin content now to hurl verbal barbs at each other. He measured himself for a moment, considering. A moment later he appeared in a body flicker in between Jiraiya and Tsunade, blue eyes as cold as ice locked on Orochimaru and Kabuto. Ah, awake at last, I see. Orochimaru chirped, clearly pleased at the blonde's reappearance. You had us worried. The blonde's scowl deepened even as he felt Jiraiya lay a hand on his left shoulder. Yeah, I'm sure you were terrified for me, he snarked. Glancing up at his sensei, he received a pleased, if tight, smile that filled him with pride. Regardless of Kabuto's arcane medical knowledge, he had done his job. Orochimaru clucked his tongue, drawing the Chunin's attention, yellow eyes glittering with an emotion Naruto couldn't place. You know that I have no wish to see you dead, child, Naruto scoffed. You tell him that? He asked, tipping his head at Kabuto. He didn't know what the hell the spy had done to him, but anything related to his chest and suddenly having the world go dark couldn't have been all that harmless. The snake Sanin's lips split into the unnaturally wide smile that was becoming far too familiar for Naruto's liking. Certainly. There's only so much Kabuto-kun can do when faced with the Rasengan, however, isn't that right? Quite, Orochimaru-sama, the teenage spy said with none of his usual smugness. It appeared the fight had taken its toll on him, a truly terrifying technique. Minato was quite the genius, wasn't he, Jiraiya? Orochimaru asked rhetorically. The white-haired Sanin tensed noticeably at the mention of his student. To think that his son would have even a fraction of his potential must have surprised even you. Naruto felt his eyes widen at the same moment Jiraiya's grip on his shoulder suddenly became painful. Beside them, Tsunade visibly flinched. How does he know? Across from them, Orochimaru chuckled cruelly. Did they not tell you, Naruto-kun? He asked, clearly taking the blonde's reaction for astonished disbelief upon the revelation of his father's identity. Sly fucker, Naruto thought, Jiraiya's teachings about looking underneath the underneath rising to the surface even as he remembered the snake Sanin's offer of allegiance. Orochimaru hadn't made a secret of wanting Naruto's loyalty back during the Chunin exams. He was clearly trying to drive a wedge between Naruto and his home. If not for the Kyuubi's cruelty, he might have even succeeded. I've known about my father for months, he returned quickly, looking to knock the insufferable grin from the snake Sanin's face. Orochimaru's eyes gleamed. Indeed, you are full of surprises, aren't you? I wonder who told you that particular bit of history. Not Sarutobi-sensei, surely. Even as he worked to dismiss the Sanin's words, the kernel of mistrust that had been planted in him from back when the Kyuubi had first revealed his parentage wrestled its way to the surface of his mind. Back then, it had been a question of why Sarutobi, for all of the years he had known him, hadn't revealed the knowledge. And while he certainly had had more pressing concerns facing him for most of his tutelage under Jiraiya, that question still remained. Why didn't they tell me? It matters little, I suppose. It is enough that you do know, Orochimaru mused aloud, repeating his words from when Naruto had revealed his knowledge of the Akatsuki. He turned to the last of the 3 Sanin with a disappointed frown. I had hoped, Tsunade, that we would come to a mutually beneficial agreement today. It seems, however, that your time abroad has done you little good. For what little it is undoubtedly worth to you, I wish you luck. The smile returned, just as cruel as the last. You will need it. Until next time, he hissed, sinking into the ground, yellow eyes fixed unblinkingly on Naruto. Kabuto followed shortly. Jiraiya sighed heavily, sinking to the ground in a heap. Slimy bastard, he growled, shaking his head. Now that that's finally dealt with, can we get to the business of actually unfucking up my chakra, Tsunade? Naruto felt his lips twitch in spite of himself. Of course Jiraiya could brush off the battle with ease, settling himself on the ground next to his beleaguered sensei. The fight had taken its toll on him as well, Tsunade scoffed. If Shizen did what I think she did, there's nothing more that can be done. It'll leave your system in a few hours. What? You gotta be kidding. Are we done here, Jiraiya? Naruto nearly jumped from his seated position as Gamabunta rumbled behind them. Forgot he was here, the blonde thought, chiding himself for his slip in situational awareness. Yeah, we're all good, Bunta. Thanks for your help today. Ha! Any opportunity to kill Manda is worth my time. Just make sure you're in better shape next time, you useless pervert, the giant toad said before disappearing in a massive cloud of smoke. Katsuya followed shortly. Super pervert, Jiraiya muttered irritably. He turned his eyes to Naruto, subdued. Suppose you and I have some talking to do, don't we? The blonde shrugged indelicately. Get your body fixed first. I can wait a few more hours. And I could probably use a nap, too. Jiraiya hesitated, clearly torn, before nodding once. You did well today, Naruto. Really well. That Kabuto kid is pretty tough. He was too fast, Naruto returned, all grimace. Could barely keep up with him. Pretty sure he could have killed me more than once and I wouldn't have even had time to react. The spy's orders to leave Naruto mostly unharmed weren't lost on him. Orochimaru's interest had saved him from a rather messy death. Or did they? He wondered, thinking about whatever technique Kabuto had used on him at the end of the battle. Shunshin-paced combat is tricky, Jiraiya said, all understatement, breaking Naruto from his musings. It's all reflex and experience, neither of which develop overnight. The large man paused, seemingly weighing his words before Hiration. It was your father's specialty. I have a few drills he developed. We'll start working on them as soon as we're on our way back to Konoha. Naruto couldn't help the small grin that split his lips at the prospect. The more high-level opponents he encountered, the more it became clear that most high-level fights weren't decided by who knew the most ninjutsu. Itachi had blitzed him with skill he had barely even dreamed of. Kabuto, test of his mettle or no, had shown him his limits almost as effectively. Namake's Minato's notes would go a long way in helping him break those same limits. And he already had an idea of how he might be able to speed the process along. What about her? The blonde asked, jerking his head in the direction of the quietly conversing Tsunade and Shizen. We did have a mission here. Who's Tsunade? Let's see. Hey, Haim. You coming back home with us or nah? The blonde Sanin glanced their way, amusement dancing in her eyes. Honey brown locked with electric blue, and for once Naruto didn't feel unsettled. Hell, looks like it, she said quietly. Jiraiya boomed a laugh, slapping Naruto on the back. Well, there you go, kiddo. Mission accomplished. He didn't start when he heard the distinctive clunk of Jiraiya's geta on the rooftop. He was having a lot of conversations on roofs these days, it seemed. First Tsunade and now Jiraiya. Maybe Orochimaru will come offer me training tomorrow night, he mused humorlessly. View from up here ain't half bad, he heard Jiraiya mutter as the large man sat himself on the ledge beside him. Doesn't suck, he said, quoting one of Ino's favorite phrases. Jiraiya didn't bother responding and Naruto didn't bother prompting him. They both knew exactly what this talk was about. The blonde didn't expect his sensei to have any particularly satisfying answers as to why he hadn't told him about his father, or even why he hadn't so much as appeared in his life before the Chunin exams if he had been so close to his old student. Emotions were tough enough to manage in regards to the living, let alone the dead, and Jiraiya had never struck him as particularly adept at managing his own grief. Their conspicuous absence from the Sandame's funeral spoke volumes. But that didn't mean Naruto was about to make this easy for him. The Sannin heaved a sigh as the silence dragged on for over 2 minutes, finally turning to look at his charge. Look, Naruto, I'm no good at this kind of thing, which I think you know by now. Yeah, I got that. Right. Anyway, I'm gonna be upfront with you. I don't have any really good explanations for why I wasn't, there when you were growing up. Figured. Not ones that matter, at least. I was doing my job and that was enough to keep me away, Jiraiya finished, turning back to the view of Tanzakagai's bustling nightlife. As far as not telling you about Minato, honestly I just didn't know how. Or when. Or what to say. And I'm sorry for that. You deserve to hear it from someone who knew Minato for who he was, not Orochimaru. or whoever it was that told you. Naruto debated letting him know that it was the Kyuubi who had deigned to reveal his lineage, but bit his tongue at the last moment. Aside from opening the can of worms, that was the Kyuubi's ability to draw him into his own mind from time to time, which I should probably deal with at some point. The knowledge would likely only make Jiraiya feel worse about the whole situation. I'm not really mad, he finally spoke. I was mad when I first found out, but that was a while ago. The old man had his reasons for not telling me, and you were off doing whatever it is that you do. But it's the past, and you can't change it. I do want to know why though. Why what? Why the fuck no one told me, you fucking lecher? Why didn't the old man tell me? He asked instead, reining in his emotions. Jiraiya regarded him, a blank mask for a moment, before Minato was on track to be the strongest shinobi in history. Stronger than Sarutobi-sensei, stronger than the Shodai and the Niding. He was damn near perfect as a ninja. The Sanin turned back to watch the cityscape. IWA hated him for what he did in the Third War, but the rest of the world was just scared of him. Hiraishin made him a ghost. He could flash in, kill you, and be gone before the person standing next to you even knew what happened. If he touched you, you were as good as dead. If one of his kunai was near you, you were as good as dead. Sensei always lamented his death, wondering what world he could have created if not for the Kyuubi. I did too, for a while. But sometimes I wonder if it might have just led to more war. His existence was a threat to every village on the continent, and being Hokage might have just made the others ally in an attempt to remove that threat. Naruto felt goosebumps break out across his skin, his mind connecting the dots and understanding the nature of the secret in an instant. If other villages knew who I was, they'd have killed me. His potential as Namake's Minato's son would demand nothing less from them, Naruto knew. I'd probably do the same in their position, he realized. They'd have tried, at least, Jiraiya confirmed. And even if they failed, your life would have been reduced to complete isolation for your own safety. That's no way to live, the blonde shuddered. Even the barely restrained anger and distaste the villagers had for him was preferable to solitary confinement. So Uzumaki it was, Jiraiya nodded. Your mother's clan was a much better option. Kushina was a good kunoichi, the Uzumaki a strong clan at one point, but the world could very easily overlook a lone Uzumaki if they found out about you. A Namake's, not so much, Naruto stated. Got it in one. What was he like? He asked, more curious than he had ever been even as he tried to process just the kind of ability the man must have possessed to inspire such fear. No wonder Orochimaru is so dead set on me working for him. If I can be a fraction as good as he was, I'd want to train me too. Focused, the Sanin said without hesitation. I've never met someone who had his drive. Not even Orochimaru. He had his light-hearted moments, don't get me wrong, but they were few and far between the older he got. I think he knew just how talented he was and wanted to reach that peak more than anything. It's about finding and breaking your upper limit. Asuma's words and wave country rang loud and clear in Naruto's ears. The blonde cocked his head to the side. And my mom? If he was that focused, I can't see him really settling down and having a kid. Unless he was like Sasuke, he thought with some distaste. His friend spoke often enough about wanting to restore his clan, but Naruto knew well enough that was a tangential goal. It was all part of the plan, but held little true significance. Minato saved her life when they were around your age now. Kushina barely let him out of her sight after that. As he got older, your mom was the only one who could calm him down. Jiraiya shook his head fondly. Pretty sure she was the one who kept him sane all during the Third War. A foreign warmth spread through Naruto at the idea of his mother, a smile taking over his face. Jiraiya, noticing, clapped the blonde on his shoulder. She was a hell of a woman, he said quietly. Naruto nodded, basking in the warmth of thinking about his parents for a long moment before he forcefully withdrew himself. He knew from personal experience how easy it was to get lost in fantasy. He'd have time enough for that back home in Konoha. And what were you doing all those years when I was a kid? He asked, refocusing on the reason why he was having the conversation at all. Espionage, Jiraiya returned with some of his usual swagger. At Naruto's deadpan expression he elaborated, a lot of what I deal with is classified A rank and above, but I've been primarily in charge of Konoha's foreign intelligence since the early part of the Third War. Any lingering anger at the man not being present in his childhood vanished as the scope of his sensei's job was made apparent. Being in charge of that and trying to take care of a child in any way, shape, or form would have made life infinitely more difficult, and duty always came first. And doesn't it always, Naruto thought. His father was likely the greatest example of that. How'd you get that job? The blonde asked, curious about his sensei's past. Hatake Tsukumo killed himself. Ah. That'll do it, I guess. Yeah, so you're sure you're not mad? Jiraiya pleaded. Naruto snorted. Yeah, I'm sure. I dunno, I don't like it, but from what you said both you and old man Sarutobi had pretty good reasons for what happened. And it's not like I can change it anyway. I'm glad I at least know why now. That's a mature outlook, the Sanin commended. It'll serve you well. Here's to hoping. A comfortable silence settled on them for a few minutes as Naruto digested everything he had been told. He had always heard that the yondaime was legendary, but to hear it in such plain detail was startling. All of a sudden his stated goal of surpassing his father seemed a bit more dubious. You really were a badass, weren't you, Dad? He'd have to find out more about what Jiraiya did as well. From what he could tell, the lifestyle looked to be nearly perfect, once one got over the responsibility of the position, of course. He traveled the world in a way that few, if any, shinobi got to. The idea of not being confined to Konoha proper was more than slightly appealing to Naruto. Being able to serve the village and protect his friends without having to deal with all the villagers on a regular basis was a tantalizing thought. Freedom. With pay. So, if you're really not mad, Jiraiya began, snapping Naruto from his thoughts. A shit-eating grin was plastered on the man's face that immediately had the blonde on edge. I suppose now is a good time to tell you that your parents made me your godfather. I'm gonna kill you, sensei. Thank you for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you want more of this story.